Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at Varys. This is the next in a longish series of videos where we're looking at the mysteries in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. And I think that Varys counts as being a mystery in and of himself. There are so many different, just going through the questions I got for this, there are so many different mysteries attached to him. What's his true identity? What does he want? Where is he? To be honest, what's the whole plan that he's got going on? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. As always, I'm going to frame this around questions I've got from my patrons. I'm going to pick up as much as I can from the chat as we are going through. I'll give an early shout out though to my moderators who are absolutely fantastic. So if you are here early, could you give a little bit of early love to the moderators? They do a wonderful job. But let's start with sort of an overview of who Varys is, what his history is, and what we know about him. So um, he was born in Lys. Now, that's one of the free cities over in Essos, and we get that information from Grand Maester Pycelle, but almost everything else we hear about him from his early days is actually from himself, which has led to a lot of people. I've got some questions on this coming up, but it has led to a lot of people questioning some quite fundamental issues about who he is, what's really going on here. But let's go with what he has said, which we should probably say up front does hang together. If it's a cover story, it's a good cover story. No one's been able to disprove it. It does all fit together. And his story is that he was born in Lys. We don't know exactly when that was, a slave. And he was apprenticed from there into a mummers troupe, a touring mummers troupe, which went around the free cities, even went to King's Landing a couple of times. And when they were one time in the city of Myr, when he was still a young boy, then a sorcerer approached the head of this mummers troupe and offered a large sum of money to buy Varys, basically. And the head of the mummers troupe couldn't really refuse this. This was a lot of money. Varys seemingly was a promising young member of the mummers troupe, but the business is business. So he handed him over to the sorcerer, and then Varys tells this. In fact, I've probably got the quote here from what he says. He says, "One day at Myr, a certain man came to our folly. After the performance, he made an offer for me that my master found too tempting to refuse. I was in terror. I feared the man meant to use me as I had heard men use small boys, but in truth, the only part of me he had need of was my manhood. He gave me a potion that made me powerless to move or speak, yet did nothing to dull my senses. With a long hooked blade, he sliced me, root and stem, chanting all the while. I watched him burn my manly parts on a brazier. The flames turned blue, and I heard a voice answer his call, though I did not understand the words they spoke. The mummers had sailed by the time he was done with me. Once I had served his purpose, the man had no further interest in me, so he put me out. When I asked him what I should do now, he answered that he supposed I should die. Despite him, I resolved to live." So that is his origin story, really. From that point, he was cast out onto the streets of Myr, and he resolves to live. But he is, from then on, a eunuch. And he starts out at the very bottom. He's got literally nothing. He's got no family. He's got no money. He's got nothing. He starts by begging. After begging, then he goes to other ways of earning a little bit of money. Eventually, he heads up into becoming a thief. And he becomes, he says, the best thief in Myr. But eventually, he meets a rival, and the rival pushes him out, and he has to change cities, and he goes off to Pentos. When he's in Pentos, he sets up business once more, but he also falls in with this guy called Illyrio, who was at the time a young bravo, one of the sort of flourishing swords for hire in Bravos. And they set up this little business. And this business was that Varys would steal something from someone. And then Illyrio would approach them and say, I know who's got this. I can get it back for you if you just give me a small fee. And the person who'd had the stolen item paid up. Illyrio got the item back from Varys and then gave it back to the owner. So they carried on this business for quite some time and eventually realized that just things, items, that wasn't where the real money lay. The real money lay in secrets. And so they would start stealing letters, but also information. And they would they started to build up this kind of criminal network across Pentos. They established this network of informants they called their little mice. These are young children out on the streets, hearing things, listening in, gaining them this information that they could then use to blackmail people. And at this time, over the narrow sea in King's Landing, the Mad King, Aerys II, was starting to get even more paranoid about all of the people around him. He became convinced that his eldest son and heir, Rhaegar, was plotting against him. And his Hand of the King, Tywin, too. They were all out to get him. So he thought the best thing to do is to hire somebody completely outside this situation, outside of King's Landing, outside of the Seven Kingdoms, someone I know hasn't got any loyalty to anyone there in the Seven Kingdoms, and I will make them my spy master. So he proactively sent people out to go and hire Varys, whose fame clearly had spread far by this point. And Varys gets himself set up as Master of Whisperers. He is the person who is telling the Mad King everything that was actually going on there in the Seven Kingdoms. So that was all in the year 278-ish, or maybe a little bit after that. We don't know the exact date that he arrived. But very soon after that, the year 281 was the tourney at Harrenhal. This was the year of the full spring. The Mad King is convinced that Rhaegar is plotting some kind of coup. And one can only assume that the information that is leading him to be convicted of this is coming from Varys, because having read through the books, we actually come to the conclusion that, yeah, he's probably right on this. Rhaegar was actually planning a coup. Rhaegar did think, my father needs to step aside. I need to now become the new ruler. So the way that the plot that Rhaegar came up with was that when it got to spring, there was a winter which lasted a while. Then spring happened. They organised this tourney at Harrenhal. All of the lords of the land were going to be there, was the plan. And then Rhaegar was going to turn up and he was going to look glorious. He was going to be amazing. He was going to be this crown prince heir of everybody's dreams. He was going to win the tourney and everyone would flock around him. And he would use this as an opportunity. Harrenhal has the history of being the place where the lords gather and they choose the new king. And he would, it would appear, use this as an opportunity to maybe just soft launch his bid to have some sort of a coup. Maybe it was going to be a little bit more than a soft launch. We don't yet know. That's the kind of thing that might come out. Incidentally, we've got the stage play, which is still in the works. Probably not going to happen now until next year. But the stage play about the tourney at Harrenhal, this is the kind of thing that we're trying to hope that there might be a little bit more information about. But Varys clearly got wind of this. Varys is, whatever else you might think of him, he's actually pretty good at his job. He got wind of this and he said to the king, you can't let this go on. You can't let this happen. You can't let them go to Harrenhal with all the lords of the land and just plot. And so Varys seems to have persuaded Aerys that he should go to this tourney. Now, it has to be said that this was a big thing because Aerys had not left the Red Keep. He'd not left King's Landing for years, ever since the Defiance of Duskendale, where he'd left and got captured for 6 months and imprisoned for 6 months. Since then, he'd not left at all. So him being persuaded to go out shows quite how seriously he took this. He heads out there, and his presence, again, we hopefully will get a bit of more information about this, but his presence there does seem to have prevented anything approaching a sort of a soft Great Council sort of pushing Rhaegar. Rhaegar did indeed win the tourney, and many other intriguing things happened there, but this was not the launch pad for a coup. Aerys goes back. And this was the year of the full spring. The full spring ends and winter comes back once more. And while this new winter has come back, that's the point at which Rhaegar then heads off, gathers Lyanna in whatever way in your imagination that happened. They head off. Then you get Brandon Stark charging down to King's Landing, and Robert's rebellion begins. Now, at this point, there's probably not a lot that Varys could do. The Mad King was in full mad mode. There was nothing that he could really do to stop Aerys from just pushing everything towards war. If you fast forward to the end of the war, what you find, though, is that Varys keeps his position. The new king, Robert Baratheon, comes in, and lots of the old guard have gone, but a few key people keep their places. Sir Barristan keeps his place. That is understandable, perhaps. He is above reproach. This is the great legendary hero, Sir Barristan the Bold. Jaime Lannister keeps his place, but of course he does. He's the brother to the new queen, the son of Tywin Lannister. Of course he does. Pycelle, maintaining this position of neutrality, but also secretly a Lannister loyalist, keeps his place. Varys is the one that's a little bit intriguing, though, because Varys had to have been seen as very much an Aerys loyalist. He was the person who was feeding information to the Mad King all of this time. Even up to the last minute, he was there. He advised that when Tywin Lannister arrived at the gates of King's Landing, they should not be opened for him. Varys knew that Tywin was not there to report for duty to support Aerys II. So why was he allowed to keep his post? I do not know, because we're not told, but my guess is that we're told that at various points during that war, there was at least one person within Aerys' small council who was feeding information to the other side. The biggest example of this is when Robert Baratheon, right at the beginning of the war, Robert Baratheon, he starts off in the Eyrie. You'll know he was there with Jon Arryn and Ned Stark. They go their separate ways. Ned heads up north to go and rally the troops there. That will take some time. Robert Baratheon heads to the south, back down to the Stormlands. That's where his home is. And the idea is that he was going to gather his army, and then he was going to sort of head up into the Riverlands and meet Ned Stark in the middle. That was the cunning plan. But when he gets to Storm's End, he gets a little bit of intelligence that 3 of his lords, his bannermen, were actually gathering together at Summerhall in order to oppose him. On the basis of that information, Robert Baratheon charged with his army up to Summerhall and took them on one at a time, so they couldn't gather into one big force. He took them on one at a time and defeated them. Somebody fed him that information. So we're not told, but I think the implication is that this must have been Varys, and this was Varys covering his back for whatever the outcome of this war was, that emerging at the other end, he could say, look, I was actually working for you. all the way through. I was looking out for you. Yes, I know I'm here and have been working with the Mad King, but now here's me giving you the information that you need. And Varys's modus operandi in King's Landing had always been, it wasn't about him and his personal power. He did not come from a house in Westeros. He didn't have any particular backing. He didn't have an army. He didn't have any of the normal trappings of the kinds of lords you would expect on the small council. The only power that he had, the only way that he kept hold of his position, was by providing the information that the ruler wanted and needed. So the working assumption has to be that he provided the information to Robert Baratheon that Robert Baratheon needed, and that's why he kept his post. So then we get the 15 years or so of Robert Baratheon's rule. And Varys is there all through it. He is given the title Lord Varys. He's not a lord of anywhere. It's an honorary title as much as anything else. The fact that he is a eunuch means that people tend not to see him as a major player in the Game of Thrones. He is not there. Yes, you could give him lands if you want to, but who's he going to leave it to? He's not going to have any children, so he is seen as less of a threat. And the way that he dresses and the way that he comports himself is playing up to this and playing into this. He comes across, his voice is very high. He giggles a lot. He comes across as quite effeminate, and in that society, that was definitely not seen as a positive thing. It makes a great play of just suggesting things. He doesn't try and push an agenda or anything like that. But behind the scenes, it becomes very clear that he's actually really quite manipulative, and he's really quite ruthless. He's told us that he has this background in the Mummers Troop, and we'll come on to this, we've got a question about it, but we've got at least 4 different disguises that we know that he's had. And these disguises from very clever people. We see the POV from very sensible, switched on people like Ned Stark, like Tyrion. At first glance, and even when they hear his voice first, they don't know it's Varys. So Varys has this ability to change his appearance, change the way he sounds quite radically. He also takes this network of informants idea that he had over in Pentos, and he's created it in King's Landing. This time he calls them his little birds, and rather gruesomely it does appear that he makes sure that their tongues are cut out so they can't tell anyone any information except him. And these are spread all across King's Landing. We get Littlefinger, who's sort of pretends to be friendly to Ned, sort of walks him through and says, that's one of that's one of Varys's little birds over there. You have to watch these guys, the people who come and bring you light your fire and stuff like that. These are all spies for Varys. And not only that, but Varys seems to know more than anyone else all of the secret passages in the Red Keep, and there are a lot of secret passages in the Red Keep. So Varys, out of everybody, has the greatest information gathering network. We're told Littlefinger has one, we're told Cersei has one, but Varys undoubtedly has the greatest and the strongest. He holds on to his power through Robert Baratheon and then into Joffrey, and even into Tommen's era. He leaves his post, though, when Tyrion escapes. Now, the thing that sort of prompts this is not actually Tyrion escaping. Jaime kind of persuades, we're told this anyway, persuades Varys to let him out. And then Varys guides Tyrion out. But then Tyrion decides, seemingly on a whim, to head up to confront his father. And in killing his father, that's the moment that Varys realizes, okay, it's time to cut my losses. I'm going to disappear now. And he does disappear. He just is not seen from again. And he's not seen from again for like a whole good couple of books until he finally appears in the final chapter, in the epilogue to A Dance with Dragons, when he appears to kill Kevan Lannister and Pycelle. We always forget Pycelle is killed in the same act. He kills the two of them, and he gives this little speech to Kevan Lannister that basically tells us a lot of the plot that's been going on that we've been seeing little hints of all the way through here, which is that he has been working for the restoration of what he says is Aegon VI, the child of Rhaegar, who everyone thought had been killed way back at the end of Robert's Rebellion, the sack of King's Landing. He says, no, I rescued that child, and I've raised that child over in Essos to be a good king, to be the best possible king, to understand the needs of the small folk, to be learned and wise and a good fighter, but at the same time to be humble enough to wash their own clothes and things like that. So he kind of sets up this idea of this perfect leader who we see in that same story. Tyrion meets him going down on the Shy Maid heading towards Volantis, and sure enough, he launches an attack. And piecing this all together, throughout this whole time through the story, Varys has been working in order to make that happen. The plan has to. I did do a video on this. If you're confused about Varys's plan, do not worry. It is confusing. George R. R. Martin even does a little, sort of like a nod to the reader partway through when the Golden Company they're told there's been a change of plans, and it's like another one. Really, their plans do change a lot, but the overall objective seems to be to get young Griff, Aegon VI, Fagon, whatever you want to call him, into power. And now, at the point of the story that we're at, finally, young Griff has launched his invasion. And so that was what Varys has been doing. He's preparing the way in King's Landing for the attack on King's Landing. And what he thought was the most effective way of doing that was to get rid of Kevan Lannister. And he even apologizes to Kevan Lannister. He says, I'm sorry, this is not personal. You're actually doing a really good job. But you're just like one of many people who was like a good man in service of a bad cause. He had to be killed because Kevan was just being competent in running King's Landing. And if Kevan was gone, who was going to take over? Cersei. And Cersei was not going to be competent in running King's Landing. And he set up a whole load of clues here as well to try and make it look like this was the Tyrells who did this. And if this looks like it was the Tyrells who did this, Cersei's going to try and get her revenge on the Tyrells. King's Landing itself, as a result of all of this, is just going to be embroiled in infighting while young Griff arrives. So that's the idea. And when you take that as a concept of what Varys has been doing all this time, you can go back through his interventions and see, actually, he's been doing this quite a lot. Another video I did was looking at when Sir Barristan was sacked, thrown out of the Kingsguard. Now, Tywin Lannister was livid about that. And when you look at what actually happened, you see, yes, this was a decision that was made by Joffrey, Cersei, etc. But it was because Varys was ever so gently to kind of suggesting a few things here and there, just putting a few ideas out there that pushed people in a certain direction, that led to Sir Barristan leaving. That is one very important figure in the defense of King's Landing gone. He was there happily letting Tyrion escape. Tyrion had shown that he was more than competent at defending King's Landing against an attack, and he didn't want to risk Tyrion being there. Both of those two people, incidentally, end up with Illyrio, and that's not a coincidence. Illyrio is Varys's partner. He is taking the brightest and the best in King's Landing and taking them out and sending them to Illyrio. Sometimes he can't send them to Illyrio, who just has to get them out from King's Landing. Ned Stark, classic example. It was Varys who was the driving force behind this idea of he's been arrested, but can we try and make him go up to join the Night's Watch? Get him out of King's Landing. That plan didn't work, but the thinking was there. So there you have Varys, and all the way through this, I would encourage you next time you're reading through the books, just always filter Varys's actions through this idea of how does he think this is going to help young Griff take over King's Landing? Because so much of what he does is just trying to do that. Subtly whispering something in somebody's ear, getting rid of a capable, competent person, sowing a little bit of dissension in King's Landing. All of those things, it's with this in mind. If you go to the very first time we got this idea that he had some ulterior motive, when Arya is there listening in to Varys and Illyrio as they're walking past with their plans, Illyrio's there sort of saying, no, we need to we need a bit of time, and Varys is there, oh, this is just like things are moving very quickly here, and they're just like saying, how can we make sure that these things that have to happen on both sides of the Marasi happen at the right time? That is what they're doing. I don't think Illyrio and Varys actually meet up personally all that much, but that is the fundamental idea of what his part of this mission is to stay in King's Landing and make it ready to fall the moment that young Griff arrives. Okay, so let's go to some questions from my patrons. Corvus Corax saying, Dear Robert, my timelines are unclear. Were there any known Blackfires alive when Varys snitched to Aerys about Rhaegar's plotting at Harrenhal? Could Varys have been keeping the realm unstable for someone else before Fagon was born? Okay, so let's talk timelines, because timelines are actually quite important, I think, here. We'll come back to timelines in a moment, a slightly different matter, but the Blackfires were defeated in what was effectively the last Blackfire rebellion. It was called the War of the Five Penny Kings, in the year 260 AC. The king at the time was Jaehaerys II, and then we're told that this was when Maelys the Monstrous was the Blackfire king at the time, pretender, and when he was killed by Sir Barristan, incidentally, when he was killed, we're told that the male line of Blackfires ended. So that's in the year 260. Before the Mad King was on the throne, just after the tragedy at Summerhall. Jaehaerys II only lasted a couple of years before Aerys II took over. Varys arrived in King's Landing at some point after the year 278. Probably was the year 278, might have been 279, but that's roughly where we're talking here. So the Blackfires, by this point, the Blackfire line, the male line of Blackfires, has been gone for best part of a couple of decades. The tourney at Harrenhal happened in the year 281. So if you're thinking about what Varys' situation when the tourney at Harrenhal happened, he's actually still relatively new at that point. He's established a network of spies, but he's having to prove himself still. He's been there for a couple of years. The rebellion happens obviously shortly after that, year 282, 283. And baby Aegon was born around the year 281. That's Rhaegar's son, Aegon. So Varys arrived in King's Landing before Aegon was born, and one of the key clues that the boys called young Griff may actually not be Aerys was Tyrion. And Tyrion, when he first sees him, he makes a snap judgment. He said he thinks this is a boy of 15 or maybe 16. And if that's the case, that means that he was born in something like the year 285. So a few years after Aegon would have had to be born. So, in answer to your question, could Varys have been keeping the realm unstable for someone else before Fagon was born? There were no Blackfires from the male line around at that time. There's no particular hint that he here had any of other ulterior motive than trying to do a good job. If you're looking at this at a very high level, if you're trying to be charitable to Varys, you would say, well, what happened is that he arrived here. Finally, he's reached the heights. A position in the small council in the Seven Kingdoms is a huge rise for somebody who started out with literally nothing, not a penny to their name. No friends, no roof over their head, absolutely nothing. And the shift across, if you're wondering about the shift across from Pentos to King's Landing, this is, I'm sure, a way of like, it would make him a little bit of cash, but he doesn't seem to be very focused in on the money side of these things. But this does shift him fundamentally from being someone on the wrong side of the law to someone on the right side of the law. In Pentos, he was a criminal. And at some point, there was a chance he might get caught. If he goes over to King's Landing, suddenly he's a lord. He's one of the most important people in the entire realm. That, in and of itself, I think, is a good enough inducement to shift over there. I don't think there's any hint at this point that he's gone there with some kind of, it might have been, but we just haven't had it, a hint that he was there with some kind of ulterior motive. Catherine Fursith saying, "Hi Robert, could you reflect on the general success or failure of Varys' schemes in the complete story of A Song of Ice and Fire? Books, present and future, fingers crossed. Will he feel that he is winning at the Game of Thrones ultimately? You've always described him as something of a maverick, and as being able to switch plans mid-flight when circumstances change. How do you think, end of his arc, he will regard his efforts? Did Varys win or lose? We think that in the end, neither Fagon nor Dany nor Jon will sit on the throne. Possibly Bran will. If he was alive to see it, what would Varys think?" Okay, so yes, leaving aside the who's going to be sat on the Iron Throne at the very end of this and the will Varys survive, we will answer both of those various levels of detail later, I promise you. But let's say he makes it to the very end. I think the majority opinion among the fandom is that Fagon is not going to survive. He will probably become king at some point. There's no reason why his attack should not, his invasion should not be successful. Which actually, slight digression, but the reason why I say that is he's landed with the Golden Company, 10,000 people from the Golden Company, soldiers from the Golden Company. This isn't just like a sellsword company. This is the elite, the best sellsword company, the biggest sellsword company in all of Essos. And they've arrived and they are gathering support. It's very clear when you start reading the Arianne chapters, for example, in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, that in the Stormlands they might not have all gathered behind him and said, "Well, amazing, we're definitely behind this guy," but there's not opposition to him there. And almost certainly they will get Dawn on side. And I did another video about the friends in the Reach that we often hear about. The Golden Company do have allies. There's some significant houses in the Reach who will almost certainly come to support this, all of which makes for quite a significant invasion force. And then you say, well, what condition is King's Landing in? And it's not in a very good condition at all. The Lannisters don't have many soldiers there. Their army is out in the Riverlands, basically. So they don't have many soldiers there. The Tyrells have got a lot of soldiers there. But what's Cersei going to do off the back of Kevin being killed? She is almost certainly going to take this out on the Tyrells. So the Tyrells are going to not be on Team Cersei. Perhaps they'll abandon King's Landing completely. Perhaps Cersei will do something as big and dramatic as happened on the show with the blowing up of the Great Sept. That would certainly get rid of the High Septon, who she clearly sees as a bit of a nuisance as well. Any which way this goes, Cersei, we see what she's thinking, and she's thinking things which will only diminish the ability of King's Landing to defend itself. She wants the taxes to be raised on the small folk. They don't have any money left. This is going to lead to more riots. She wants to get rid of the Tyrells. The Tyrells are the people with the army defending them. She wants to get rid of the High Sparrow and the Faith Militant, which she herself allowed to be set up. And that would be setting the faith against her. The people as a whole of King's Landing will turn against Cersei, and that's the moment that Fagon is going to be arriving with his army and looking like the ultimate Targaryen king here to reclaim his throne. So everything is pointing to him claiming the throne, but longer term, he probably won't hold on to it. So Varys, to bring this back to your question, will Varys look at this as he's done well in the Game of Thrones? I think thus far, he will probably think he has done quite well. He will probably think, well, what was my job? My job was to keep the Seven Kingdoms and specifically King's Landing destabilized until the army is here and is ready to invade. And they have been destabilized. And he's got rid of Sir Barristan, the most legendary fighter left in the land, Ned, who is incredibly competent, Kevin, again, very competent, Tyrion, who showed that he could lead the defenses of the city against a serious attack. Even Tywin Lannister. It's noticeable when you read that section. This is from Tyrion's POV. That this is all set up as being this is just Tyrion on a whim, deciding I'm just going to go up to see my father and confront him. And when he's there, Shae is there, that gets him angry. He kills Tywin, and it's presented because we see all this through his perspective as being this is Tyrion just kind of like following his gut instincts and doing what he wants to do. But when you strip it back a little bit, you see Varys, who is there, who clearly will have known that Shae was there. He didn't tell Tyrion that. He left Tyrion to discover that for himself. And when Tyrion says, how do I get to my father's apartments? Varys could have said, we're in a rush here. We've got very little time. We're making a break out from King's Landing. I've got a ship waiting for you. We haven't got time for you to be going off doing crazy stuff, which would just raise the alarm. We need to go. That's what Varys very probably should have said, but he doesn't. He says, you have to go up the exact number of rungs on the ladder. Then you have to take a left. You have to go past 3 doors. You have to then turn left. You go there, and he gives very precise instructions to Tyrion on how to go there. And he will know that Shae was there. The more you look at it, the more it looks like this was Varys setting this up for Tyrion. I mean, he didn't know what Tyrion would do, but he could probably guess. And this would, in one fell swoop, get rid of Tywin Lannister, who clearly is a competent person and would have been a very dangerous person to be in charge of King's Landing when Fagon was trying to attack it, and Tyrion, who he could then smuggle out, or if Tyrion is foolish enough to get himself caught, will be killed. So in one fell swoop, he could get rid of both of those people. So Varys will look at this and say, so far, I've managed to evade escape. I've kept this place destabilized. I've set this up so it's going to be exactly right for when the invasion happens and King's Landing is ready to fall. So he will think that he's done a good job. What happens next, I think we'll have to wait and see. Personally, although we will come on to this, given how tied in he is actually to the Fagon idea, I think if Fagon goes, he will go too. Let's go to some questions from the chat. John Merkel saying, on a reread, I saw big parallels between Arya's well in the Red Keep and the Night Fort. After some digging in, it made me think of Varys as the thing that comes in the night, among other symbols. Yes, this is an interesting one. So what we have in the Night Fort, you may well remember, you had a chapter there with Bran and those around Bran, and they tell their stories, the spooky stories of the Night Fort, one of which is the thing that comes in the night. And the story is being told, and then they hear this scuffling sound coming from down in the well. And this thing starts rising up out of the well. They try and stab it, but thankfully don't succeed in actually damaging it, because the thing which emerged from the well was Sam, who had just come through from the north. He'd been guided there by Cold Hands, and he could then guide them through the other way. The well that we have for Arya in the Red Keep is how she then escapes out of. She went hunting for the cat, the last cat she had to catch. She overhears Varys and Illyrio. They kind of disappear, or they appear up out of a well, and then she kind of like escapes afterwards. Are they therefore sort of parallels of that story that we get from Bran? Yeah, I guess you could say they are. I don't think that's like one of these things that is deliberately written in by George R. Martin so that we can get some particular nugget of information there. But I think it works very well as a parallel. Roman Lakovet saying, if Varys wants a king who will care about the small folk, why wouldn't he simply support Rhaegar? So again, this is if you're being charitable to Varys, and in some ways I try to be, then you say that Rhaegar was only really around for the first 4 years that Varys was there. And during that time, Varys had only just got his job, and actually Rhaegar wasn't in the Red Keep all that much. They'd moved off to Dragonstone, him and Elia. So he'd not had huge amounts of time to spend with Rhaegar, and he was still trying to prove himself at his job. And Rhaegar was very clearly plotting against the king at the time, from Varys's perspective. So we can look back and say, yeah, Rhaegar would have been a better king than Aerys was. Varys won't have known Rhaegar all that well personally, but what he will have seen is a crown prince who was plotting against his own father, who was obsessed with prophecy to the extent that he thought he was the focus of this millennia-old prophecy. and then either kidnapped or eloped with Lyanna Stark, which, there are many other things that happened, but was the cause of a huge rebellion. So Rhaegar during that period probably didn't come across as particularly stable. Let's put it that way. We may look at him and say, and Sir Barristan and various others can say, yeah, he was a good person. Ned clearly thought he was a good person. Varys may well have thought he was a good person, but also he was there on a job supporting the Mad King. So, yes, I think in an ideal world, then maybe he could have said, yeah, that's what I want. So that's the first point. The second point is that personally, I know some people do believe this, but personally, I do not believe that Varys is in and of himself a Blackfire loyalist, or even purely motivated to have a good king, whoever they might be. I think that a huge part of his motivation for getting young Griff onto the throne is because of a personal relationship with Illyrio. It seems most likely to me, I did videos on this, if you're interested, feel free to check them out. It seems most likely to me that young Griff actually is secretly Illyrio's son, and this is what Varys is doing for his old friend. He is putting this person onto the throne, and he probably doesn't care about whether they're a Blackfire or not a Blackfire, or truly a Targaryen or not truly a Targaryen. I think he does probably want to have a good king on there, but that's not the driving force for him. Let's go to a question from, I think I had one more question here in the chat. Yes. And famous elephant saying, beware the perfumed seneschal, Varys, the stinky stewardship, or Resnack. Will Dany act on Quaith's warning? So Quaith gave a long set of warnings about beware of all these different people. And it was almost written in code, so Dany wouldn't necessarily know exactly who all these different people are. One of the things is beware the perfumed seneschal. Now, the perfumed seneschal is the name of a boat which brought Tyrion and Makoro towards Meereen. So there's that, but also Varys could be very easily the perfumed seneschal. We're told he does wear perfumes, and the seneschal, the courtier, the advisor, he fits that. So Dany may well interpret him as being that. Now, the thing about Quaith's advice is that Quaith's warning about beware this person, beware that, is basically beware everyone. Without wishing to do down Quaith's advice, what she's trying to do here is say, trust yourself. Don't take the advice of all these other people. You're a Targaryen. Think fire and blood. Think invasions. That's what you should be doing. And all of these other people around there trying to give you advice, ignore them. So that's what Quaith's agenda seems to be. She says stuff like, remember who you are, Daenerys. The dragons remember, do you? She's pushing her towards being this Targaryen presence who ignores the advice of other people. So, yes, I think Dany will probably take it seriously. She may well make the link across there. Will she act on Quaith's warning? Well, it depends on what you count as acting on Quaith's warning. We don't know exactly how she might meet Varys, but let's sort of go to a sort of a midpoint likelihood. She arrives in with her invading force young Griff Vagon is in power in King's Landing. She has to stop somewhere. Maybe she does, like on the show, stop at Dragonstone. That would certainly add a bit of nice symmetry for her personally, as a story. Maybe Varys is the one who comes on behalf of young Griff to be negotiating. Varys will, I'm sure, know that Tyrion is there and will probably think, hey, I got on all right with Tyrion. So maybe that's how they come into contact. At which point, yes, I could certainly see that she would be wary of him, not least because of what Quaid said. And I had a question also from Sam Klontz II saying, good day, Robert, and to you too, sir. Do you think Varys has Tyrek as one of his little birds? Thanks for the great content while we all enjoy the long night. Yeah, long night. So Tyrek Lannister is a relatively minor character, but he generates quite a degree of fascination because he disappears. There's a riot in King's Landing when Myrcella gets sent off to Dawn. All of the court goes down to the docks to see her off, and on their way back, there's a riot. There's food shortages. These are the nobility there. One thing leads to another. There's a riot. Most of the people manage to get back safely. But one of the notable people to go missing is Tyrek Lannister. Now, people have speculated, not just fans, Jamie speculated that perhaps Varys was behind this, or at least knew it might happen, because he was not there. He was one of the very few members of the court who didn't go down into the city. He stayed up in the Red Keep, which feels a little bit suspicious, perhaps. And then Tyrek Lannister, yes, of course, he could have just completely disappeared. If you get a riot, if he gets pulled off of his horse, he's wearing rich clothes, probably some rings and stuff like that. People will have perhaps ripped them from his fingers and beaten him. And then what happens there? Are you really going to leave the body of clearly a very important figure, a Lannister, just lying around where the King's Guard can come in, the Goldcloaks can come in and start questioning people left, right, and centre? Or do you just disappear the body? So that is still the most obvious answer to what might have happened to Tyrek, but it's possible that this was another one of those things that Varys has done to build the case. So Tyrek certainly would have had some inside information. He was the squire. We often talk about Lancel as being the squire. Robert Baratheon had two squires. The other was Tyrek. And so he will have known about the getting him drunk so that he could die at the hands of a boar. I was going to. Boars don't have hands, but you know what I mean. So there's that, but also if you want a Lannister who you can then later put forward as your candidate for Casterly Rock, then yeah, Tyrek's a pretty good one. So lots of people have speculated maybe that's what's going on with that. Is Tyrek now one of his little birds? I personally don't think so. He might have been captured and is being held somewhere, but I don't think he's being used as one of the little birds who is basically the spy network. Okay, I think that's been caught up in the chat. And let's go to Stephen saying, hi, Robert. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry if this has been asked many times before. Do not worry about that. But what was Varys's original plan for Viserys, Dany, and the Dothraki? If his long-term goal was to put Fagon on the throne, was he always planning that Dany would marry Fagon, or that the Dothraki would support him, or was he just keeping his options open? Was he also just hedging his bets when Robert ordered Dany's assassination? Um, right, so I'll do the first half of that question first, which is what was the original plan? And the original plan was that Viserys or Dany would be basically sold off to the Dothraki in exchange for Khal Drogo and his Dothraki horde going with Viserys over to the Seven Kingdoms so that Viserys could claim the throne. Now, we know that the plan wasn't for Viserys to claim the throne, but for Fagon too. And I don't personally see this as being a big stumbling block. I know some people go, well, hang on, how if you've got Varys there at the head of this army, the people would not like the Dothraki being there. The people of Westeros, the Dothraki are not good conquerors. They don't go there, free villages, and say, now you go and farm until your land at peace. They will destroy villages. They will do horrific things to the people there, and then they will move on. So whoever is at the head of that army is not actually going to be in a very good place to rule long term. They might be in a good place to capture the throne because the Dothraki are fearsome, but probably not in the best place to rule long term. Added to which, at this point, let's not forget, if young Griff was about 15, as Tyrion thinks, when he sees him, at that point in the story, he's maybe 13. So probably they would have thought of that as being still a little bit too young to be heading up an invasion. So the invasion would have happened. And then after that's happened, and people, let's not forget, they knew what Viserys was like. Viserys would combust or something. The people would turn on him. And who would come in to the breach? Actually, here's another Targaryen, and this one seems like a really good guy. And if you look at it one way, actually, he's probably ahead of the line in the line of succession, so he should probably be king anyway. That seems to have been the plan. Dany, at this point, was the idea that she would marry Fagon, possibly. But obviously not in the short term, because in the short term she was married off to Khal Drogo. The impression that we get from Illyrio in particular is that they saw Dany at this point as being useful, but not a key part of the plan. Useful in as much as that she could get them the Dothraki horde by being married off. It caught everyone by surprise when she suddenly turns up with dragons. They thought she'd just gone. They'd written her off. They said, that's it, she's now out of the equation. And then she suddenly turns up with dragons. It's like, wow, okay, this changes lots. So the upfront plan to be marrying her to young Griff developed over time. But perhaps they'd wanted them to marry. The second part of the question about Robert ordering Dany's assassination. There's a few points here. The first is the point that I've just made, which is if the assassination went through, then this didn't hugely affect the plans. In fact, what you find happened is that when the attack on her happened, that's the point at which Khal Drogo said, right, now I'm going to go and invade. He'd been putting this off for a long time, but he said, no, this is it. If people are going to be trying to assassinate my wife, I'm going to go off and invade their lands. So perhaps perhaps we give Varys too much credit for this, but perhaps Varys understood that an attack in and of itself might be the thing to push forward their agenda. But the second, and I think quite crucial point here, is that Varys played both sides. Yes, he hired, or didn't so much hire as he put the word out for people to assassinate Dany. And so you get that wine seller who's ka-ching, he sees all the money possible and has a go at assassinating her. But as well as that, he also, Jorah was in his employ, he also sent a message to Jorah to say, somebody's going to try and assassinate Dany, can you stop them? So Varys was playing both sides in this. It's notable, I think, that even though they discussed it in the small council, he didn't hire a professional assassin. Certainly not the Faceless Men. No one that they thought, well, they'll probably be successful. If you hired the Faceless Men to kill Dany, Dany would be dead. But they didn't. Varys just said, here's a reward for anyone who kills her. And so any rando person could have a go. So, yes, he was hedging his bets, but I think that he saw this as a way of pushing their agenda forward. And if worst comes to the worst, and Dany is killed, she's not a central part in the plan. So that's he was playing every single side of that, and I think he would have seen it as whatever happens, I win out of this. John Merkel, the spider knows all. Do you believe this includes Jon's parentage, regardless of which theory is right? So this is an interesting one because we obviously don't have a POV from his perspective, and there's never been a moment when he's been sort of in a position where that could come up. Jon Snow, to people in King's Landing, Jon Snow is, he's an interesting side story. This bastard of Ned Stark is an interesting story we've got going on there. The fact that he then went to the Night's Watch and he became Lord Commander again, notable. But his backstory isn't something people talk about. They don't really care about that. So, might Varys have known? It's not impossible, but we've no evidence that he does. I think is probably about as far as we can go on this one. The fact is that lots of people knew, if not about Jon himself, but about the Tower of Joy. So Varys almost certainly will have known about the Tower of Joy. If you think about it, we set this up as this great mystery. Where is the Tower of Joy? They're hiding away. This is not a secret place. This was a watchtower on the main thoroughfare between Dorne and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. The Dornish knew that's where Rhaegar was. The House Fowler are a house they're devoted to monitoring what happens in the Prince's Pass. And they will definitely have been aware of the fact that two members of the Kingsguard and the heir to the throne just wandered into one of their towers in the middle of a civil war. They will definitely have been aware of what was going on. It's notable that when Sir Gerald Hightower goes to find Rhaegar, he doesn't seem to have any problem in knowing where to go. Somebody would have told him where to go. This wasn't a huge mystery. Similarly, Ned, there's a number of theories as to how Ned knew where to go, but he definitely did know where to go. He went directly there. So this wasn't a huge mystery. The question of who Jon Snow is, I imagine that a lot of people will have, in passing, wondered. Clever switched on people like Varys will have in passing wondered. Also, Ned Stark's emerged from there with this baby. But that happened, and I think this is really important sort of context. That happened at a time when everyone was thinking about other stuff. Varys was there. He would have been fighting for his political career. He could have been sentenced to death by the king at this moment in time. And if he'd known about the fact that Lyanna Stark had a child, the one bit of information that would have definitely shown King Robert that he was on his side would have been giving him that information. So probably he didn't. He might have been able to speculate, but his mind was on other things. King Robert was setting up his entire new reign. His spy master was there, who will have had a lot of demands on him to try and work out who could they trust in the new regime. So I think the answer is he might have known, but it didn't seem like a hugely important thing at the time because there were many other important things going on. And then what happened? The North is a long way away, and it's not really an issue for most people. And Jon didn't seem to play a role in anything. So that's one of those things that you could just let lie. Nadia Van Albada saying, "Does Varys know Littlefinger's plan with Sansa? How would he use that?" Does Varys know Littlefinger's plan with Sansa? So, the Varys and Littlefinger relationship is a fascinating one, I have to say, because they both seem to have a sort of grudging respect for each other, and they both, in as much as they knew each other's plans, they probably were happy for the other to do their thing. By which I mean, what's Littlefinger's default strategy? Create chaos and then back himself to benefit from it more than anyone else. In his mind, what's Varys doing? Varys is getting rid of competent people in King's Landing. This is creating chaos. Littlefinger is probably okay with that. Similarly, Varys will probably look at Littlefinger and go, "Here's somebody who is destabilizing the Seven Kingdoms." And that's what I want to do right now, destabilize the Seven Kingdoms. So probably they had this, they probably never talked about it, but they probably had this kind of shared understanding that the other person was actually helping them out, not because they wanted to help each other out, but what they were doing was helping their own agenda. Does Varys know about the plans for Sansa? Well, Varys, he will definitely be aware of Littlefinger's weird obsessions and things like that. In the current point of the story, with Sansa gone, he will have gone, sent his people out looking for Sansa, and almost certainly, I would have thought somebody over in the area, if he has got some spies there, would have said, "Oh, and Littlefinger emerged with this, bastard daughter of his, Elaine Stone." So it's like, that's an interesting timing coincidence that Littlefinger is obsessed with Sansa. Sansa goes missing, and then somebody of her age and description, other than the slightly different color hair, suddenly appears with Littlefinger. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's sort of vaguely aware. He probably won't be aware of the exact details about what's going on there, but again, he's probably thinking to himself, "This will help. This will destabilize the Seven Kingdoms, because if he knows Littlefinger's plan is to go up and, on behalf of Sansa, make a claim for the North, that's just going to keep everybody occupied up in the North." that means that the Knights of the Vale, there's almost no chance anyway, but there's zero chance that they're going to be involved in helping out down in the south. So, yeah, I don't think that he knows the details of it, but the bits that he does know and what he knows about Littlefinger's overall plans, yeah, I think he's okay with it. Orion's Orcas saying, "Hi, Robert. Hope you're well. I don't like or trust Varys." Fair enough. His little birds are mutilated by him, but he supposedly cares about the realm. He knows the truth about King Aerys being mad, but ruins Rhaegar's chances of a change of king without a civil war. He knows Jon Arryn was poisoned, but did he do anything to stop it? He knows Ned Stark to be innocent and should be regent, as Robert wanted. Instead, he talked Ned into confessing treason, which led to his death. These three men, better men, all died with Varys' help, influence, and silence. Is he just like Littlefinger? Only his chaos is leading to one goal, Fagon on the Iron Throne. Also, what do you think of those windowless rooms of his? As they're a lower chamber no one knows about. Throwing out Modlove. Yes, thank you. I did this at the very beginning, but moderators, thank you. You're amazing. If you're there in the chat, please could you just throw a little bit of love at the moderators? They do a fantastic job. And also another thank you I do every single time. Patrons, I hugely appreciate you. Thank you so much for all of your help and support. I cannot do what I do without your support, so thank you very much. And one very brief plug, I've said it for the last few weeks, but if you want to watch my videos on the main channel on Spotify, they're now on there. Not just the audio, but the videos as well. I'm uploading all of the back catalogue up onto there. That'll take quite a while probably, but the idea is to get that up to speed. Once I'm up to speed with that, then I'll also probably put these live streams up onto there as well. So do just go to Spotify, search for Indie Geek, and you will find me. But Orion's Orcas, is he just like Littlefinger? We sort of been talking about this. I think there is a clear similarity in as much as they both trust their intelligence. They both have plans that they're not really sharing with many other people. They both rely on manipulation and spy networks, things like that. And they're both, as a sort of an output, create a lot of chaos in the Seven Kingdoms. However, their motivations are clearly very different. And the chaos that Littlefinger is trying to create is simply because he backs himself to make the most of it, because he wants to advance himself. And he also has these weird, creepy obsessions with first Cat, then with Sansa, which is different to Varys, who is trying to create chaos, but it's targeted chaos with a view to bringing in the person he wants onto the Iron Throne. Littlefinger, it's all about him. Varys, it's not all about him. It's about, again, depending on how charitable you want to be, it's about putting his candidate on the Iron Throne, or perhaps it's about caring about the small folk, ultimately. So they are different, but it looks at first sight as if they're quite similar, because a lot of the outputs are quite similar. And then, you also asked about the windowless rooms of his. Yes, so he has. We're told his rooms in the Red Keep. He could have had good rooms in the Red Keep. This is probably the key point here. He was a member of the Small Council, but he didn't. He had windowless rooms, 3 of them. He just had a stone pallet for a bed, not much by way of ornamentation or anything like that. Are there secret rooms underneath that? Quite possibly. I think though that the key thing is that he left when he abandoned his rooms, he left hidden an old coin from House Gardner. from the Reach, knowing that this would be interpreted by people like Cersei as a clue that perhaps he was working for the Tyrells. So my instinct is that his rooms, there may well be secret passages off from there. Maybe he's gone to a place that doesn't have any secret passages, that doesn't have any alcoves around that people can spy in on. That would make a whole lot more sense to me in many ways. But the whole idea is that is just a simple base camp. He's got the entirety of the Red Keep with the secret tunnels that to access. He doesn't necessarily need one attached to his room, because he will know that at some point he may have to escape, and if he does, then the first thing people will do will be search through his rooms, and if they then find things that he doesn't want them to, that's not good. Much better for him to be hiding things in parts of the keep that he knows will not, the secret passages he knows no one else knows, and people will not be searching in. Okay. Maura Lee. Hi, Robert and Dan, the best and handsomest dog. I'm very curious how Varys got involved with Fagon and what his ultimate hope for the Seven Kingdoms is. What will be his ultimate role that he will play in both the short term and the long term? He's a very interesting character. I'm curious about what will ultimately happen to him by the end of the 2 books. What will his legacy end up being when all is said and done, when we look at the man's life and work? What do you think? How... I've sort of covered a lot of that, I think, in previous answers. But one thing I will pick up on is that how did he get involved with Fagon? So I said we sort of come back to the timelines. The best way that I can understand this at the moment, given the information that we have, is that Varys headed over to the Seven Kingdoms to take up this new exciting job opportunity for King Aerys. And he was only there for a couple of years, uncovering a plot against his employer. But he does see the very last bad days of King Aerys. And he then decides, I need to hedge my bets here a bit. And he also feeds some information to Robert Baratheon's side, so he gets to keep his job after the Civil War. Now, at this point, Robert Baratheon becomes king, and he probably very quickly will look at him and go, well, he's not much good either. And then it'll be, how do we, what do we do about this? His old friend Illyrio, meanwhile, has married a woman, Sarah, who almost certainly is a Blackfire from the female line. They have a son. She dies, and they have a son. And Illyrio, perhaps, again, we don't know this level of information, but Illyrio perhaps says to her, as her dying wish, I will put your son onto the Iron Throne. And Varys is the way in here. He's in the small council. He knows all the secrets. But this child is still young. And so the deal is struck that this child will be raised to, first of all, as if they were this prince who is the heir to the throne, Aegon VI, but also to be a good king, to go out and learn humility, to learn to care for the small folk, to be learned and wise and all of the good things that you'd expect a king to be, but also humble. And so this was the plan. And it was like, okay, this will take us 15 years. This child has to grow up. And at the end of that 15 years, Illyrio, your job is to get an invasion force ready. Varys, your job is to make sure that the Seven Kingdoms is ready to fall to an invader. So that seems to have been the way through. And so Varys is motivated a bit. This is just some of this we get information on. Some of it is, I wouldn't say speculation, but it's sort of informed hypotheses. Varys does want to have a good king and sees this as a way of having a good king, but also he wants to support his friend. So that's how he got into this, and he's seen one king after another be pretty terrible, and decided he would do something about it. Roman Lakovets, how do you think Aegon's story would have played out if the 5-year gap wasn't scrapped? Interesting. So I did a video which I think has just come out about the 5-year time gap, if you're interested in that. But basically, George R. R. Martin originally planned for there to be after A Storm of Swords, a 5-year gap. And then he would pick up on things in the next book, lots of flashbacks. This is what happened the last 5 years. But the 5-year gap would allow all of the characters to age up. I think fundamentally the issue is, would it affect it at all? Because it's very easy to say. So the character only really gets introduced after when the 5-year time gap would have happened. So they weren't going to launch an invasion during that 5-year time gap. There would have been this would have been the character growing up a little bit more. The bit that I find interesting is that I often, when talking about this, say you could see how George R. R. Martin was planning this. All of the main characters are being pushed into these places where they can stop for 5 years and just learn and grow and have little training montages. Arya's there with the Faceless Men, and Bran's there with Bloodraven, and Jon's just been appointed Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Sam's about to go down to Old Town, and you can see all of these people. They've gone to places, and they could conceivably stay there for 5 years. What about Tyrion? This is the bit I haven't discovered in sort of researching this. Maybe somebody has, and I just haven't seen it. But Tyrion, where we left him off, he just killed his father, and he headed off on the boat to Illyrio. Where was George R. R. Martin going to leave him for that 5 years? Was he just going to leave him drowning his sorrows in the Free Cities? Was he going to get him meeting up with Fagon early on? Or was the meeting with Fagon going to happen after the 5 years? Because that's quite a crucial difference for Tyrion's story arc. Whether here's this guy who claims to be Aegon VI, who he's known for 5 years now, and has a good idea whether he's a good person or a bad person, or he's only just met him. So that's the bit that really intrigues me, is that what would have happened to Tyrion there, through whose eyes we are introduced to young Griff. But in answer to the broad question, what would have happened to his story, I think he was just grown for those 5 years, and he wouldn't have been introduced until afterwards. Kolnitsky saying 5 years of drinking. Yeah, I mean, for Tyrion, it may well be that that's what it is. 5 years of drinking in the Free Cities. Michelle Raimo saying, "Hi Robert, I hope all is well with you and Dan." It is, thank you. My first question is Varys a mermaid? I jest. This was, for those who don't know, this is a tinfoil hat theory which has done the rounds many times. There's not much evidence for it, but it's quite fun. My question is around your thoughts on Varys's monologue to Kevan in A Dance with Dragons epilogue. I'm of the belief that Varys may be telling the truth about Fagon, because what does he gain from lying to a dying man? I always go back and forth on it. If Aegon is real or a Blackfire, and I just keep coming back around to Kevin's death. And George loves writing the heart being in conflict with itself. What do you think? Is Varys telling Kevin the truth? So let's actually we can quickly go to that. Might be able to just quickly read a very little bit. So Varys is talking. So he shoots Kevin, and then he sort of explains it. He says, I thought the crossbow fitting. Your niece will think the Tyrells had you murdered, mayhaps with the connivance of the imp. The Tyrells will suspect her. Someone somewhere will find a way to blame the Dornishman. Doubt, division, and mistrust will eat the very ground beneath your boy king, whilst Aegon raises his banner above Storm's End, and the lords of the realm gather around him. Aegon? For a moment, Mrs. Kevin, did not understand. Then he remembered a babe swaddled in a crimson cloak, the cloth stained with his blood and brains. Dead. He's dead. No. The eunuch's voice seemed deeper. He is here. Aegon has been shaped for rule since before he could walk. And then he sort of goes off and says how amazing he is for a little while. And the argument here is, I think it's quite a persuasive one, is that this is Varys talking to Kevin, who he's shot and will very soon put out of his misery. And he's quite chatty, Varys, it has to be said. He sort of apologizes to him, saying, it's nothing personal. You were just being very good and competent in your job, and I couldn't allow that. But he then goes off and talks about Aegon for a while. The argument is that Varys knows that Kevin's just about to die, so he's got no reason to lie to him. He's got no reason to make up this thing about Aegon. He's not really Aegon. Actually, somebody are pretending to be Aegon. Why didn't he say that? He could say that. I mean, I do find that reasonably persuasive, but at the same time, if I think there's a couple of elements here. Firstly, he's not alone. There's the little birds who are there, and he kind of whistles, and then they suddenly appear. So, yes, he might have cut their tongues out, but he probably doesn't 100% trust them with what is the biggest truth there is. If Aegon actually isn't Aegon, but is somebody that he's put up and pretended, he never wants that information to come out. So he's not just talking to Kevin. There are other witnesses, and he will be very aware that there will be, people can be listening anywhere. So it doesn't hold to me that he thinks all he's doing is talking to a dead man, and it doesn't make any difference. So that's the first one. The second one is that he will have to be in the practice of saying Aegon, and he does this. Where if you read it, he says, whilst Aegon raises his banner above Storm's End and the lords of the realm gather around him, he wouldn't at that point say, whilst the boy that I'm pretending is Aegon is. No, he has to get into because he's at some point he's going to emerge from the shadows, and he has to convince everybody that this is Aegon. And if he slips once, then it might not work. So it's only when Kevin sort of queries Aegon that then Varys goes off and gives this little monologue. Now, you can take a step back from that again and you just say, well, yeah, but he didn't have to give that monologue about how Aegon's a good person and all the rest of it. But I think you can argue this either way. Is what I'm saying is that, yes, this is one of the bits of that you can argue against Aegon being there. But also, I don't think it's drop dead 100% evidence, because it's not just talking to a dead man. There are other people around. So it's one of those things that if I'm kind of like stumbling over my answer here, the reason is that I haven't got a clear come back against this other than the fact that this is not just him talking to a dead man. Um, but yes, if he's going to tell the truth anywhere, it would be there. He just doesn't. I don't think he owes. I don't think he would feel he owes Kevin the truth. So I don't think he would feel that he has to give him anything more than the line that he's giving everyone at that time. Nadia Van Albara saying, if Varys has spies at the wall too, what will knowledge about the others do with his plans for Fagon? Yeah, good question. So Varys has spies everywhere. He will be aware of like the rumors about what's going on at the wall, but at the moment, I think you have to remember this is still kind of second or third hand stuff by the time it's got down to Varys, and he, if he is right that he hates magic and loathes it, then this is magic-y stuff, and he probably won't want anything to do with it. So yes, he might want to oppose it when he takes it serious, but the Night's Watch haven't succeeded in persuading anyone except Stannis that this threat is real. So I don't think there's a reason why whoever Varys's spy is at the wall, assuming he has one, that they would be persuaded either. But what will knowledge of the if it does become more general knowledge, then yeah, I mean, I think probably the answer is going to be quite similar to what Stannis has come up with, which is, yeah, we need to defend against the others, but in order to do that, we have to have a united Seven Kingdoms. I can't fight from the wall if the North is divided. So his first thought is, well, we'll unite the North, we'll kick out the Boltons, we'll get Starks back into Winterfell, and then we can start facing the North. And I think that would probably be Varys' same idea with Fagon. Rabbi B saying, joining late, but I want it to be known that Varys is Sarah Blackfire's sister, and I will not be convinced otherwise. Much love to you, Dan, and all the mods. Well, thank you very much. I'm on the verge of, sometimes I just write the video on a whim because I just had a thought. I started writing a video called is Varys really a eunuch? Is he actually secretly a woman? My take on this, and I might be sort of treading on the toes on another question I've got a bit later, but anyway, the argument that Varys is Sarah Blackfire's sister. So this is I think that the argument here is that Sarah Blackfire is the woman that Illyrio married, and their child is is young Griff, and Varys is involved in this by being her sister, and so all of his story about what happened in the past is all made up. I think this is one of those ones where it's quite hard to argue against, because I don't think there's much, maybe I've missed it, I don't think there's much evidence that sort of supports this, other than we don't have evidence that he 100% is a eunuch. We've not seen under those robes, it's like, okay, that's true, but that's not an argument for him being a particular other person. I think we do need to take into account the facts of timing here and quite how long a con this has to be in order for this to work. So if he isn't who he says he is, then he has been acting in character now for the full 15 odd years of Robert's rule, the couple of years afterwards, and he didn't give up on that during his time in secret when he was no longer playing the role of the spy master. He kept up that role, and then the 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years working for Eris II, and also the period before that, because Eris um, would have he heard reports of this eunuch called Varys, and then went and recruited him, and that means that his reputation would already have been there. People will know who he was, which means that he had to have had that identity before that. So what you're looking at already is something approaching quarter of a century of a disguise that does not, in my view, particularly advance the cause all that much. As in, if you say yes, you could just be a different woman, rather than. I mean, we've had female mistress of whisperers before. This isn't an unknown thing. So why you have to then say, okay, well, actually, I will dress up as a eunuch, and then every day for quarter of a century, I shall shave my head and all of the other things that, in order to keep the disguise going. To what gain is that? I struggle to see one. And in terms of timing, this idea of, you know what, I will take on. I am a woman, but I shall take on the appearance of a eunuch. Will have had to. That decision will have had to be made well before the idea of moving to King's Landing was even a thing, and well before young Griff Fagon was born or even conceived, years before that. So for me, the timing doesn't quite stack up. I understand, given quite how mysterious Varys is, why there's a desire for him to be secretly someone else, but this would have to be such a long con, and it would have had to have been conceived many years before the whole point of the con came into fruition. Martin S saying, hi there, Martin. Evening, Robert. YouTuber Men of the West made a Jaime Lannister versus Aragorn who would win in a fight video a couple of days ago. You can probably guess roughly what he thought. Well, I'm going to assume it was the same. I did one of those a while ago. I'm going to assume that he said the same thing as me. For those wondering why this is a thing which comes up, this is something which George R. R. Martin himself. I'm obviously a massive George R. R. Martin fan, but sometimes he says rather controversial things about the Lord of the Rings. One of which is that he thought that Jaime Lannister would beat Aragorn in a fight. I personally and humbly beg to differ. And actually, if you go and have a look at the video I did, I would say that 90 to 95% of the comments are people agreeing with that. So yes, I can definitely guess what Yoyston would have said on that one. Neon Knight, thank you very much for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that, but thank you very much. Great Khan, very generous, thank you very much. Saying, hi Robert and Dan the dog. A digression, if I may, since I have no other time to ask. Regarding the pink letter in your live stream, this was a few weeks ago, you discussed the motivations of the letter's author. Suggests someone wanting to spur Jon into marching on Winterfell to, and this is carried on in another, very generous, thank you very much, carried on in another chat saying, to assist Stannis. I put it to you that whoever wrote the pink letter wanted or hoped Jon to die instead. What other outcome could one possibly expect from the Lord Commander abandoning the Night's Watch to fight in family politics? Possibly even, and I'm assuming there's another one coming there, but I will just pick up on the substance of that bit. The motivation of the letter writer in the pink letter. So the pink letter the clear motivation was to push Jon Snow to get him angry and to push him to go to Winterfell rather than what he was doing before. Whether the letter writers knew what his plan was before, which was to go up to Hardhome, but to do go to Winterfell instead. Now, the question, and you saw this part 3 of this, you say possibly dragging a host of brothers with him, other than death, especially one as heretical as Jon had already been. Thoughts, scratches for Dan, plus mod love, absolutely. So is the motivation for this to get Jon killed by the Night's Watch? I can certainly understand the argument here, because that is what happened. But I think you would have to know a lot about the situation of what was going on in Castle Black. If you're going to say the idea is that I'm going to try and get Jon killed, what you're doing is you're saying this letter will prompt Jon to make this decision, and it will also, and Jon making that decision will then prompt people to kill him, which is like two layers of sort of manipulation there. And I think that you would have to know what the situation was like in Castle Black. You would have to know that there were some Night's Watch people who were already incredibly against Jon, and they would be up in arms to the extent that they would take up arms against him. And also, you would think you would know the situation well enough to know that Jon couldn't just go. He wouldn't have enough people rallying around him straight away. That anyone coming to attack him would be not be able to get through. So yes, I completely understand the logic that he was killed, and so perhaps this was the motivation there. But I think that in order to get to that point, that's two layers of manipulation. If what you wanted was to kill Jon Snow, there might be better and easier ways to do it than sending a letter. So I like the thinking. I really do. But I think that the only thing that the letter writer would be able to know, unless they have been talking to those members of the Night's Watch who were about to attack him, the only thing the letter writer would know would be what Jon's likely reaction to that would be. Martin S. This is picking up on Yoyston, Men of the West, which, by the way, if you've not come across it, Men of the West, great Tolkien channel. He's been going for a long time. Does really solid lore videos about Tolkien's Legendarium. And so following up this question about his video about Jaime Lannister versus Aragorn, he said that Aragorn would win, but he's still, I think there's a typo there, that Jaime would win option, asking AI for arguments in that direction, but countered them. He also admitted the AI said Aragorn if asked directly. Okay, so he's steel manned that Jaime would win option, asking AI for arguments in that direction. Okay, yes. So I mean, I think that the George R. R. Martin's argument for why Jaime would win was that Jaime would be wearing armor, and armor is really often undervalued by us in terms of how useful it is in warfare. To which my response is, but Aragorn can wear armor too. So I don't personally, I don't see that as the big thing. Yeah, I mean, I think there is only one correct answer there, which is Aragorn is a better fighter than Jaime Lannister. John Merkel saying, my shiniest tinfoil is that Varys is the Corsair King. Fun, beyond unlikely, and based on long shot wordplay in the Black Cells. Ned felt the coarse hair. Don't waste many brain cells on it, though. Yeah, good tinfoil, the Corsair King. So yeah, the Corsair, for those who don't know, is when Varys visits Ned in the Black Cells, he goes in disguise. So he's not going officially as Varys, and it's very dark. And Ned feels stubble, coarse hair, and this is like, okay, so this is Varys in disguise, in heavy disguise. But yeah, the Corsair King, no. I can't see that myself, but yeah, it's a fun idea. Thank you. Let's go to Taylor Jones saying, "Hi, Robert. If I remember correctly, Jaime coerced Varys to assist with the rescue of Tyrion. Varys seems to be someone who rarely does anything not furthering his own plans. Is this a case of him being legitimately coerced and adjusting on the fly, or was this manipulation the other way, or at least mutual? Did Varys manipulate his possibly forced participation into the murder of Tywin off the cuff during the escape?" Yes. I mean, I sort of covered this a little bit earlier on in answering a question from the chat. But my general take is that Varys saw this as a win-win-win. He could get Tyrion out. If he manages to persuade Tyrion to go and confront his father, then he could get Tywin killed as well. And Jaime would almost certainly need to be leaving too. So in one fell swoop, he could get 3 very competent Lannisters out of King's Landing. So I don't think he needed much by way of coercion, but Jaime needed to believe that this was hard work. Okay, let's go to Sarah Arpegos. When do you think Varys started to plot for young Griff? Did he ever truly serve the Targaryens, or did he always, or was he always plotting against them? Was young Griff even born when he went to Westeros? So no. In terms of the timeline, which I've sort of mentioned, name checked a couple of times, young Griff was not born. Even if you think that young Griff is Aegon, then he was not born at the time that Varys first arrived in King's Landing. So he was not, when he first arrived, he was not there sort of working against the Targaryens in order to put young Griff on the throne, because young Griff didn't exist. And if he is the age that Tyrion thinks he is, then he wouldn't exist until a good couple of years after Robert's Rebellion anyway. So although we don't know, and we probably never will know, my best guess is that Varys went to King's Landing with the best of intentions, just to do a good job. Maybe with half a thought about, his friend Illyrio there desperately wanting to, on behalf of his wife, to get a Blackfyre onto the throne. Is there a way we can do this? But a fully fledged plan at that point, no, they didn't. They didn't even have somebody to put on the throne. Ranabim Mitra saying, "Salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. Hope you're well and excited for the updates we've been receiving online across House of the Dragon, 97 Kingdoms, and Aegon's Conquest show." Yes, well, I will do this. I know this is just your intro to that, but a little update for those who have missed these things. They're not big updates, it has to be said, but they're quite good ones. We've had a casting. I don't think it was quite a leak, but it wasn't really an official announcement of Ali Blackwood, Black Ali, who is not an actress that I think I know, but she certainly looked the part. So that's good that she's going to be there. Confirmation she will be appearing. And then the other little bit of information we've had, there's a guy called Matson Tomlin, I think his name is, who is he has been commissioned to write the adaptation of Aegon's Invasion for HBO. Now, we have very few details on this, to the extent that we've still not got clarification if this is a TV show. Might this be a movie even? Could it be film, then a TV show following on? Is it just about the invasion? Does it move on into the Sons of the Dragon? We don't know any of these elements of detail yet. But Matt and Tomlin on X just yesterday, I think it was, sounded like he was just hanging out in an airport for whatever reason and had a spare hour or so and did an impromptu Ask Me Anything, which I missed, but I saw afterwards, and he had some questions about A Song of Ice and Fire things. The three that I spotted, and he gave short answers to these, so don't get too excited in advance, was that which is the scene you're most looking forward to seeing when it finally happens? And he said the first one. It's not quite clear to me whether it was just because he's excited to see his thing on the screen, or whether he's already got an idea of what the first scene might be. I do wonder whether you might go heavy on the first scene of that, of the vision of the others. Aegon's a vision of the others, and the Song of Ice and Fire. It's possible. The second question he was asked was, how much of this have you written? And the answer was lots. And then, is George R. R. Martin involved? And the answer is yes. Now, he has previously said that George R. R. Martin is involved, that he's sat there and talked to him and asked him lots of questions. George R. R. Martin has been involved in early production planning on all of the Song of Ice and Fire spin-off shows so far. So I don't think that's anything of a particular surprise, but generally positive stuff. Question from Martin S, saying, I think Steel Man is basically the opposite of Straw Man. Anyway, Aragorn is probably the greatest named third age human in Tolkien's stories. Yes, I mean, having read it, sorry, it was just poor reading comprehension on my part rather than anything else. But yes, I think Steel Man, from what I understand, he tried to create as strong a case as possible for Jaime to win, and still couldn't. Thank you very much. Caius Ballerina, if Varys has knowledge of the tunnels of the Red Keep, then he knows about the wildfire. Why didn't he try to stop Aerys with that plot? It would have killed him too. Why not get rid of it in the years after? So the wildfire is not just in the Red Keep. There may well be some in the Red Keep, but the wildfire is dotted around King's Landing as a whole. And this was put there over a period of time by the pyromancers on orders from the Mad King, from Aerys. So Varys would not necessarily know where all of this was. He will know where some of it was, but not all of it. Why not get rid of it? It proved to be useful. Tyrion found out where a goodly amount of it was and put it to good use to save the city. So that makes sense not to get rid of it. Why didn't he try and stop Aerys with that plot? Well, we simply don't know. This is one of those things where the only bit that we hear about here is from Jaime's perspective. And we don't know what Varys was up to in that particular moment in time. We hear that he advised against opening the gates to Tywin Lannister, which, given, I mean, this wasn't just and Tywin came in and ended the war. They pillaged their way across the city. The Lannister soldiers, it was pretty horrific stuff. So that was actually quite a sensible bit of advice from Varys. Um, one could certainly think that at that particular moment in time, it's just him. He would probably be a little bit concerned for his own life and for what whatever secrets and things he had. So you could well imagine that he might have made himself scarce for a short amount of time. He certainly couldn't be everywhere, and so he certainly might not have been there when it was became apparent to Jaime that the Mad King was about to do the bad thing. So this is simply we don't have the information to conclude one way or another why he didn't do something. But I think that's me caught up on the chat. Yep, let's go to a question from. So this is Ranabin Mitra. I just answered your preamble first. So I believe I found a way to prove that Varys knows that Fagon is a Blackfire. In that monologue during Kevin's death, we read some of it out. Varys said, "Someone somewhere will find a way to blame the Dornishmen." Why is malcontent towards the Dornish important to Varys when the primary premise of the ruse is that Fagon is Rhaegar's child, aka half Dornish? For me, it's because the Blackfires were always anti-Dornish and originally rebelled against Daeron II because of Dorne being married into the throne. Their primary support faction were the many secondary Marcher lords in the Stormlands. What do you think? I think it's an interesting thought. I have to admit, I've always read that line as just a throwaway line from Varys about, and there's so much anti-Dornish sentiment around here. Someone will find a way to blame the Dornish. So when you think about it, there is a lot of anti-Dornish sentiment because what had just happened recently was Oberyn came and he had, from Cersei's perspective, he'd there taken his place on the small council and taken his place as one of the judges on the trial of Tyrion that she was absolutely convinced had to be found guilty, and then volunteered to defend Tyrion. So Cersei won't have been happy with him. Then the Tyrells hate the Dornish. This isn't a recent thing. This is something that's been going on for hundreds, thousands of years. So I think, given that those are the two main families based in King's Landing at the time, I think Varys is just simply stating a fact that someone somewhere will find a way to blame the Dornish, because the Dornish also aren't there. So you can you can blame the Dornish very easily. I don't think it's a thing that he particularly is aiming for. The clues he leaves that firstly, the crossbow was the weapon of choice, which is supposed to make Cersei at least go, "Oh, Tyrion did that. This must be his weapon of choice. Therefore, maybe it's Tyrion." And also the Tyrell or the Reach coins. So there's another nuance here, actually, which I said we always forget about Pycelle being murdered. And I think it's actually more important than we often think, because why would you murder Pycelle? Varys is there trying to kill off the competent people. And there's no doubt that Pycelle he's clever, he's knowledgeable. And if you kind of look at the small council meetings, he actually often comes up with reasonable, sensible advice. For example, Cersei is there saying, right, we need to pay for all of our, a new navy to be built, so we won't pay back the Iron Bank. And the only person who objects is Pycelle, who says, this may come back to bite us. The Iron Bank are actually kind of a big deal, and Cersei just ignores him. So yes, he is there as a sort of a potentially competent person, but at the same time, he's not very effective. Cersei doesn't listen to him, doesn't take his advice. So why kill Pycelle? And I think the answer is that there was a time when Tyrion got rid of Pycelle. He put him down into the dungeons, and he basically said, "You need to be sending to the Citadel. You need to send us a new person." And Varys came up with this information that they were thinking of sending. I've forgotten the name of the maester off the top of my head, but they were going to send this archmaester up and to replace Pycelle. And this person, everyone knew, was a Tyrell. I think he's even Mace's brother. It's someone like in the close Tyrell family. And Cersei will have seen that as the Tyrells are on a power grab. Why on earth would you kill Pycelle if not to put your person in on the small council? You've already got yourself, you've already got one of your bannermen in there, and now you're trying to get this extra person in. You want to become Hand of the King. I mean, there's a lot that Cersei would just start getting really paranoid about. So, and I think Pycelle's death will just add to this idea of that it's the Dornish. Not sure. Thank you very much for the super sticker. Very much appreciated. Not sure, saying, I just want to hear Robert say, "Go Dolphins." I'm going to assume that's a sporting thing. Not my sport, though. So I've no idea whether that's a good thing or a bad thing to say, but I've said it now. Let's go to Howland's little sister, saying, I've been reading a biography on Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. I probably mispronounced that. A French diplomat from 1754 to 1838. He was an impressive man who withstood the Catholic Church, French Revolution, Napoleon, and the Bourbon Restoration. There are great similarities between him and Varys. If you place Varys in the real historical world, which monarch could have used him to his best abilities? Well, great question. First of all, I have to admit, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand is not somebody that I'm particularly aware of. So I will happily take your lead in saying that he's very similar to Varys. In terms of who would have used him to his best of his abilities, I think the answer has to be someone clever. It's like someone clever who also wants to get rid of their opponents. So if we're going on France, then I think Napoleon was often out of the country and would want somebody to be. He was also very paranoid about all potential opposition. Someone like Henry VII in England was very start of the Tudor reign, very clever and very astute. He would definitely have made use of him. So yeah, I mean, happy to have any further thoughts in the chat. Fred saying Philip II from Spain had a great network of spies. Interesting. Lorelei saying, when thinking of Talleyrand, think Machiavelli crossed with Marx. That's a strong thought. And James Boros reassuring me that nobody minds the Dolphins, except sometimes Jags fans, maybe sometimes. And reassuring me this is an NFL team. which I assume is American football. They are inoffensive, apparently. So there we go. I got away with it. I could have said a bad thing, and it was all okay. Levac saying Henry VII was hyper paranoid as an old man. Would have loved Varys. Yeah, absolutely. Aaron M127 saying, "Hi Robert, hope you and Dan are doing well." Yeah, thank you. I'm loving these videos and look forward to every Thursday. Well, it makes me very happy. Thank you. I'm currently listening to A Game of Thrones, and something just stood out to me this morning. When Varys visits Ned in jail, it mentions Ned touches Varys's face and feels stubble. Do you think this is somehow part of his disguise as the jailer, or do you think it might hint to him not really being a eunuch? I feel like stubble would be hard to replicate in a disguise. I know that I know after that, from Ned's POV, it refers to it as false stubble, but I thought that that was maybe just Ned not being able to conceive of him being a false eunuch. Well, yes, in terms of POV, let's just be clear that we shouldn't, just because a character thinks something. George R. Martin loves doing this. Just because a character thinks something doesn't mean it's necessarily the truth. So Ned thinking this was false stubble doesn't necessarily mean it is false stubble. But I would agree that stubble does seem to be quite a hard thing that for you to add to a disguise. But Varys, we're told, is a master of disguises, and this is just trying to show how good he is at disguises. So I don't think that this is a hint of anything. The idea that, well, Rugen is the name of the jailer, who was Varys all the time, and no one ever knew. Is a very well established and very clear disguise that nobody would ever be able to see through. So Varys clearly has gone deep in order to be Rugen, and he very clearly sort of swaps in and out of Rugen on any given day. So actually growing stubble, he would have to grow it as Varys in order to have it as Rugen, and that doesn't quite work in terms of the disguise because Varys has to be obviously completely clean shaven. So I think the answer is no. This is just a part of the disguise. Someone said something which amused me in the chat. Carl Karsnock saying inoffensive because they can't score on offense. I that sounds harsh, but it does amuse me. Because I know nothing about the Dolphins, which isn't an invite to tell me everything about the Dolphins. I'm sure they're wonderful people, doing a wonderful job, although it sounds like perhaps they're not. Anyway, Yeldinel saying, "Hi, Robert. Hi, Dan. And thank you, moderators." Yes, thank you again, moderators. Question re Varys. I have heard of the theory that Varys might be a woman. What is the evidence, if any, and how would it be relevant for the story? Other than that, I wonder what his plans are going forward. I mean, we broadly know his grand scheming plans, but he is basically stuck in hiding in the Red Keep's bowels for now. If he could make his escape, would he do that? Would he bide his time and re-emerge at some point, or would he travel somewhere? I also have other questions, but they're related to Brienne and the Whispers. So is there a chance we get a video on that? Well, on Brienne and the Whispers, I haven't got a video planned on Brienne and the Whispers. Drop it into over on Patreon for the next live stream, and I will answer. If non-related to the issue questions, I try to pick up at the end of the every live stream. So do drop that in next time. As for Varys, I did answer the question about him being a woman. I answered about being a specific woman, but in terms of him being a woman more generally, just at a very high level, this would have to be a very long con. We're not just talking like a couple of years. He's had this disguise now for the 2 years of the war, of the story that we've had so far, including the period of time when he's just been in hiding and then just appears to Kevin in the epilogue. We've got the 15 or so years of Robert Baratheon's rule. We've got the 4 years or so before that of working for Aerys. And this was already an established. He got headhunted, which means that people knew who he was. So he will have had that identity well before that as well. We're talking quarter of a century of keeping up this appearance, which is a very long con for, I personally see, minimal advantage. The advantage of many people say the advantage of appearing as um, a eunuch is that people, they don't take him seriously. They don't think that he could have a house and things like that. Those apply perhaps not to the same great extent, but they do apply to women in this world as well. So I don't think it's a huge upgrade, downgrade. I think it depends on your perspective. But in terms of, and then the timing, as I say, uh, if you're saying he was a woman, the working assumption is that he has taken on a different identity for whatever reason in order to further the plot that he's trying to do here with young Griff. But he would have had to take on that identity several years before young Griff even existed. If he could make an escape, would he do that? I think the answer is no. I think he's actually very comfortable hiding in the Red Keep. And his role, as we kind of established, I think, right at the beginning of this, with Illyrio, they had a role each. Illyrio's role was to get an army, an invasion ready to be coming over in time for Varys's role. He was to make the Seven Kingdoms and King's Landing in particular vulnerable to that invasion. So he is still doing his job. I don't think he will see. Yeah, he will think, oh well, I can't now influence matters at the small council in the way that I could, but I can do things behind the scenes, like killing Kevin and the like. So if he were to leave and go, then he would miss out on the intelligence gathering about what's going on, which is hugely important if you're going to be attacking a city. If you've got somebody who can listen in on all of their defense planning, that's pretty good. Then secondly, he can do stuff. He can take people out. He can cause chaos, lots of different things. Let's go to DickCrabb'sSquire saying, "Good evening, Robert and Dan. In Game of Thrones Season 2 episode with the bread riots, what looks like Varys can be spotted in the crowd just before the dung is thrown at Joffrey. I made it my profile pic so you can judge for yourself." So I did. I had a look at your profile pic. Thank you very much. For those, and I'll respond to that in just one second, but just for those who just need the context, this is, I did mention it a little bit earlier in the stream. There was a riot. Marcella is sent off to Dawn. The court head down to the docks, and on their way back, there's a food riot. Basically, they take it out on the rich people. The small folk take it out on the rich people, and Varys wasn't part of the group that headed down, which leads some people, including Jamie, incidentally, to wonder whether he was in some way behind this or knew it was going to happen. I genuinely can't remember on the TV show. I don't think that they did anything with that in terms of Varys. It was just a thing that happened. I did look at the picture. It does look a bit like Varys. But my general take is that if Varys were down there, first of all, obviously the TV show isn't the same as the book, but if Varys were down there, I suspect he would be in disguise. I suspect he wouldn't go down looking as himself, mingling with the small folk. He would go down there in one of his many disguises. Um, Northern Tommy actually get a really a point I should have put in my video about the 5-year time gap, saying Littlefinger is disappointed that he didn't have 5 quiet years for his fruits to ripen. A lot of those plans are very much long term. Grant, so 5 years though is not 25. Yeah, this is I've talked a couple of times about George R. R. Martin sometimes does kind of little nods to the attentive reader about things like, so with this 5-year time jump that he was planning on doing, he Littlefinger is explaining to, I think it's to Sansa, all of his plans, and he says it's a shame I didn't have 5 years to let all of these plans come to fruition, but we can carry on ahead anyway. And it's just like, that's sort of George R. R. Martin saying to us, yeah, it would have been good if the 5-year time jump had worked, but it didn't, so let's just move on. For those who want, I always spoil my own videos. For the video, I think it was the one that just came out yesterday. But the reason why he dropped it was having built up the structure of the books so that he could have a 5-year time break, was that he spent a year writing this into what became Feast for Crows before abandoning it. And the reason why was that he said, okay, it worked fine for some characters. It worked fine for Bran. You could just leave Bran up there in Bloodraven's cave, or you could leave Arya over there with the Faceless Men. And then come back 5 years later and just sort of give a little bit of an update about what they were doing. But he couldn't, for the life of him, he couldn't justify with Cersei just sitting around for 5 years. That's just not what she's like. And so he would be there trying to give a catch up of what happened in the last 5 years, and it would be like, okay, so we had 4 different hands of the king. We had this crisis happened over there. She then went off and did this thing over here. There was just too much, because Cersei would not ever sit still. Similarly with Jon, he just felt it was a bit anticlimactic that he should get appointed appointed Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and then the next you hear from him is say, okay, so I was made Lord Commander, and then nothing much happened for 5 years. But now things are about to happen again. And that just felt a little bit anticlimactic. So that's why he didn't go for it in the end. He was a bit disappointed, but he decided it did not work. Let's go to Sir Friend saying, happy Thursday, Robert, and to you too. Firstly, I'm loving your recent videos exploring the geography of Planetos. I hope there are more to come. If I can think of some more to do. There was what's west of Westeros and what's east of Ashai. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe what's south? Sartorius? I don't know. Well, maybe I'll do another one. Anyway, on Varys, one of the disappointments on the show was his ending, particularly how rushed it all was. In the books, it looks as though Varys is fully Team Fagon, so do you see that lasting? Will he go down with Fagon? Will Tyrion be able or want to convince Dany to take on Varys? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. As always, best wishes, warmest regards. Well, same back to you. So his ending on the show, if you don't remember, was that he, pardon me, he I think he got burned by Drogon. Dany basically punished him for turning coat once more, and she pointed out quite fairly how many different kings that he had served, and therefore she couldn't trust him. Now, it just kind of made sense in the context of what it was, but yeah, it was a little bit anticlimactic. I think in the books, or I should probably say the on the TV show, the reason why this did come across as a little bit, it kind of fizzled out. Varys' story did sort of fizzle out, and he spent a bit of time just sort of like hanging out with Tyrion and just sort of like being quite a good double act, and they were quite fun, those two together on the show. I quite enjoyed it, but he didn't have it felt like he didn't have his own plot line, because they did not do Fagon as a plot line. in the books he's there, and he is, so he's definitely going to be spending the next part of time getting Fagon onto the throne, and then once he is on the throne, then he is going to be wanting to stabilize his rule, and almost certainly we are going to get some sort of conflict between Dany and him. Now, he is convinced that he is Aegon the Sixth. Her reaction to discovering that there's this person who, if they're telling the truth, could potentially be ahead of her in the line of succession, will be absolutely fascinating. But then, given the warnings from Quaithe, it's entirely possible that she may conclude that he's not who he says he is. So then we have Varys, who is basically going to be Master of Whisperers to him, and I don't know, maybe even Hand of the King. It depends. He might make John Connington his Hand of the King, but he's going to be a very influential person there in his small council. So if Fagon does go down, then Varys will go down with him, I think. Scamelia saying, just join the stream if this has already been addressed. So sorry, not a problem at all. Do you think Varys's plan is what he says to Kevin, or is it something else? Also, I missed the Weary Traveller Guide to Westeros. When is that coming back? Soon, I hope. Yeah, sorry, I know people do keep on asking this one, but yes, I've not forgotten. Do I think the plan is what he says to Kevin? Well, let's go to the plan here. I mean, the high level plan, I think the answer is yes. So what he says to Kevin is, so he's killed him here, and he's killed him in such a way, or he's on the verge of killing him in such a way that Cersei will think that the Tyrells had him murdered, possibly with Tyrion, and that the Tyrells will suspect her, and someone will blame the Dornishmen. Doubt, division, and mistrust will eat the very ground beneath your boy kings. That's Tommen, obviously, whilst Aegon raises his banner above Storm's End and the lords of the realm gather around him. Is that the plan? Yeah, absolutely 100%. That's at a high level. Varys is trying to cause dissension in King's Landing, cause disruption between the Tyrells and the Lannisters in particular, so King's Landing is vulnerable. And while that is happening, the Lords of the Realm are gathering around Aegon in Storm's End. We hear in pre-release chapters on the Winds of Winter that Storm's End has fallen to him, so that is definitely the plan. There are echoes, Targaryen echoes, historical echoes. That is where King Jaehaerys I was hiding out. He wasn't really hiding. That was where he was based while Maegor was seeing out his final days in King's Landing. So this idea of the king in waiting being in Storm's End while everybody, kind of the banners of the land, flock to him is very evocative of Targaryen history. And are the banners going to flock to him? Well, quite a few probably will. I think the Dornish probably will. We've got the Friends in the Reach. I think quite a lot of the Crown lands definitely will do. So before you know it, quite a lot of people will probably pull themselves around and support him. So at a high level, that is definitely the plan. The next bit about Aegon being, shaped for rule since before he could walk. A king must put his people first and live and rule for them. And that bit, it's rhetoric, but I mean, at a high level, again, that yes, he does seem to have been raised to better standards than, say, Joffrey was. And in terms of sort of the final bit, saying, or a little bit earlier, me saying, sorry, it's not personal. It's just that you're doing a competent job. That also, I think, is true. So overall, in answer to the question, is that Varys's plan? Yes, I think it is, and I think he's trying to cause dissension in the ranks in King's Landing until Vagon can build up a big enough coalition to take on King's Landing. Jack Deland saying, "Evening. Will the Bells episode in the show be mirrored in the books with Griff, with him committing an atrocity like Dany did? Battle of the Bells PTSD." Okay, so the Bells episode that's the one on the TV show where she's flying on Drogon and then just starts burning the city, and it's the bells that seem to trigger her. Now, many people have pointed out that the bells is actually the Battle of the Bells is this is connected in with Jon Connington, actually, who is likely to be in and around King's Landing later on. And that's a battle which happened in Robert's Rebellion. And at a very high level, again, what we have here is that he had a chance. Robert Baratheon had been trying to get his army up sort of northwards to join up with his allies. He just kind of nicked off to this town, and Jon Connington was searching the town to try and find him. And he's Hand of the King at this point. This is his big moment. He can prove himself, but he does not find Robert Baratheon. And then the bells start ringing, and then reinforcements come, and he loses. So off the back of that, he gets sacked as Hand of the King. He gets sent across in exile into Essos, and as far as everyone's concerned, he drank himself to an early grave. So if anyone's going to get PTSD from bells, it's going to be him. So I think it's entirely possible. I'm not going to sort of speculate too much on what happens at the very end of Dany's arc, because it's so far away at this point. It won't be the same as what happened on the TV show. That much I'm pretty sure of. But it is the kind of thing that with the bells that you go, okay, maybe that is them mixing up, the showrunners mixing up a couple of things, and they didn't have Jon Connington as a character, so maybe they thought, oh, the bells, that's a good idea. George R. R. Martin told them the bells, something happens with the bells, and they think, well, yeah, let's do that. So I buy this idea that they conflated some ideas in there, and it just didn't work. The other thing you have to remember with Jon Connington is that he has got grayscale, which is a death sentence. And he will think that he's going to die. And so actually it's not, he might reach a point where he doesn't care about his own well-being anymore. He just reacts to stuff. It's possible. Scamalia, what will Varys do if Fagon appears to fail? I mean, I think it depends on what you mean by fail in what way. If he appears to fail to capture King's Landing, well, I think that he would just push more resources into making it happen. If he appeared to fail to be a good king, then I think Varys would be trying to firmly manipulate behind the scenes. This is, I think, where Varys has put all of his eggs in this one basket now. Sure, he might have secret escape routes and things like that, but this is his plan. Let's go to Dominic Vaughan. Hi, Robert. Hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. Two big questions regarding Varys for me. Is there more plot relevance to the wizard who neutered him and the demonic voice, or is this just highlighting his general mistrust of magic and things out with what he can control? And secondly, how do you think he, as a perennial survivor of regime change, will meet his fate, or do you think he will survive versus what happened on the show? To answer the second bit, well, I think I've already answered the second bit. I think that he will go down with the ship with Fagon. I think that's how he will die in the books. In terms of the wizard who neutered him, this is a really interesting question. So this is the bit of his backstory. On the show, he captured that wizard, showed Tyrion, and the implication was that he was going to do terrible things to him. We don't get that in the books, but we do get him talking to Tyrion in a way. When he tells the story, it's quite interesting. He tells this story from his youth, and seemingly in an attempt to persuade Tyrion that he stands against Stannis and Melisandre because he hates magic and magic users. One thing, I've never done this, but maybe someone has somewhere, I think it would be absolutely fascinating, is to have a little bit of an analysis of when George R. R. Martin writes something along the lines of Varys's voice changed and it went a bit deeper. Because this happens quite a lot. And it happened there. It also happened, I think, when he's talking to Kevin in the epilogue, the book we've just been reading from it, when he's killing Kevin. And I think it would be fascinating to look at those instances. Does this seem to be when he's telling the truth? Or does this appear to be when he's telling a story? Tyrion, certainly, we got that from Tyrion's perspective. He certainly was wondering whether this is him sort of giving a dramatic monologue. He doesn't use those words, but that seems to be what his sort of default position is. As for the sorcerer, I think I did do a video on this one as well. My general feeling is that we're not supposed to know. A lot of people try to tie this in with like the bigger plot, but my instinct is this is just George R. R. Martin having a bigger world. And if we assume that this is true, then this is a wizard who did a horrific thing to a young Varys, and that shaped him as a person, not just physically, but then it was from that moment afterwards that he decided to live, decided to be great. So that is an important and shaping moment, and we do not need an extra layer to who or what this wizard was in order to have a purpose for that, a narrative purpose for that to happen. In terms of, is there anything else that's going to happen with that? I hope not, because of that reason. Because if it's something else, if this is actually Varys's main, his main driver is to be hunting down this wizard, then I think actually that kind of like belittles him a bit. In my view, just in terms of character development, he's currently there, I would hope, laser focused on getting his person into King's Landing. If while that's happening, he's actually focused on doing something else, I'm not a big fan of that. And more to the point, this is about making a bigger world. In a bigger world, there should be loose ends. There should be things you cannot 100% explain. There should be things that aren't to do with the main plot. And so I like this, because this is just a thing which is just off there. It's like Tyrion's Uncle Geryon. That's great. I hope we don't get any more information about that. That's just an extra bit of family history that helped shape Tyrion into who he is. We don't need any more answers on it. Just my personal take. Marcus Montgomery, do you think Jon's parentage gets revealed during the time Fagon invades? How does Varys react to this? So I think Jon's parentage gets revealed probably to him, but to the north. Probably not in this next book. So probably is we're waiting for A Dream of Spring on that one. But when it does happen, then excuse me. Pardon me. When it does happen, then the information is going to slowly disseminate. It's not just like, wow, this is the big thing, because at the time there will be so many other stuff so many other things going on. The others will be starting to invade. Probably the dragons are here. There are going to be big things going on. The idea that there's someone else who, oh, actually, I've now just heard a rumor that that person up there is another secret Targaryen. That's actually for many people not going to be the top of their list of priorities. So, will it be revealed while Fagon is in power, while Varys is there? Possibly, um, but I don't think this is going to be top of their list of priorities. That will become important once the others have been dealt with, is my general view, because it becomes important for the who becomes king in the south. I mean, it's also important in terms of the prince that was promised thing, but that's a northern thing as much as anything else. And when I say northern, not just the north, as in defending against the others coming from the north. And a question from Scamelia saying, picking up for Aussie Greg. Thank you. I love it when people do this, pick up questions for others. Picking up for Aussie Greg, is Varys the perfumed seneschal? Quite possibly. So the perfumed seneschal is one of the things that the people that Dany is warned by Quaithe to beware. Yeah, there's a number of options here. Sorry, excuse me. Pardon me. I think I've got a cold coming on. You might be able to pick up on that. Apologies, but this is one of the ones where there's a number of options, and I don't think we're going to get a very specific. It's definitely this. It could be the boat, which brings Tyrion and Moqorro to or towards Meereen. It could be one of a number of people in Meereen itself. It could be Varys. And the key point as with all of these kind of prophecies and things and warnings here, is that it's what Dany thinks is the most important. If she decides that this is about Varys, that's the important thing. George R. R. Martin is so much more focused in on how people react and respond to a prophecy than the truth or not of the prophecy itself. Right, let's just a few people talking about that analysis of his voice. Not sure, saying I think that's his actual Varys's voice when he sort of it goes a bit deeper, he drops the voice a bit. I think that's his actual voice when he's not masking it, which is it's quite an interesting idea that even if you don't buy into any of these ideas that Varys is secretly a woman, secretly whatever, he definitely plays up the image of this harmless eunuch. All of his tittering and giggling and high-pitched voice, that's him playing up on the image. So yes, him having a lower-pitched voice than he generally uses certainly would make sense. I think that's me caught up in the chat. Thank you, everyone saying bless you in the chat. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Now, I think it's a cold rather than hay fever. I do get hay fever, but earlier in the year, usually. Let's go to Stephen saying, are Varys's little birds active throughout the Seven Kingdoms, or are they mostly in King's Landing? Does he use other more conventional spies and informants? If so, are there any prominent characters who might be working for Varys? I have my suspicions about Qyburn and Taena Merryweather. In a similar vein, during Feast for Crows or Dance with Dragons, is there a minor character in King's Landing who could be Varys in disguise? Okay, so the little birds are specifically the children he's imported. Illyrio seems to source them. They get their tongues chopped out, all very gruesome, and then shipped into King's Landing, and that's where Varys uses them. So that's the little birds. He does have other spies and the like. Classic example, obviously, is Jorah. So basically was paying Jorah. He was dangling something in front of him, a pardon, basically, and in order to spy for him, to let him know what was going on. And that was what Jorah was doing. He was sending information back. But we also get various hints when he seems to know what's going on in Old Town and various other places. He does have these spies around and about. They're not called the little birds, though. Are there any other prominent characters who might be working for Varys? You suggested Qyburn and Taena Merryweather. Excuse me. Um, uh, I think of the two, Taena Merryweather, who is a friend and bedmate to Cersei, is one that y- I do wonder. Um, we've not got any conclusive evidence on this, but there are a couple of times when she does seem to sort of push Cersei towards um, suspecting the Tyrells of stuff. She's the one who kind of makes the link about the queen that was found in Varys's rooms, and making the link across to Olenna Tyrell, who apparently has a whole sort of chest full of these kinds of coins. And there's at least one other time when she um, uh, suggests the Tyrells are up to no good. It's the kind of thing that perhaps Varys might want, is to be just dropping little bits of poison into Cersei's ears. In terms of who might be um, uh, Varys in disguise, I don't think we've seen any specific characters, but our attention won't have been drawn to them. Um, he's had four, to the best of my knowledge, he's had four official disguises. He's been a begging brother, he's been a stout man in a robe, he's been a matronly woman, and he's been Rugun, the Locke. So he's he's able to take on a number of different roles. It's possible that he's been there, but my general take is, while he's been missing, he's actually been spending most of his time in the Red Keep, just listening in. Scamania saying George R. Martin usually draws from real-world English history examples. Is there a real-world example of Varys that you can think of? Not specifically. I mean, we did have I can't remember who it was earlier. There was a suggestion of a Frenchman who was here we go. Howland's little sister was suggesting Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, who was not a figure that I was particularly aware of before, but people in the chat have agreed that he seems to be quite a good match. And not every character that George R. R. Martin has is based on a specific historical character. He does like echoes of historical characters and historical events and places. Um, Varys is not one that I've heard there being a specific person that he's based it on. Then I've got a question from a Lorelei Dragon saying, "Hi Robert, it's been a while since I've read the books, but as best as I can tell, there are some major differences between Varys's original characterization in the books and versus on the show. Fagon aside, the show Varys seems more sympathetic and less ruthless, but I could definitely be misremembering. What are your thoughts on the differences there? Is Varys functionally the same character on the show as in the books?" Um, Functionally, in terms of how he's operating, yes, the same character. He's certainly identifiable. You can see him, but the character in the books is a lot um, darker. This is true a lot of the case actually with characters. Tyrion's character is a lot darker in the books, for example. Um, but the way that he treats the little birds, cutting the tongues out of children is horrible. They kind of skated over that really on the TV show. And I think the other thing was, certainly in the second half of the show, he kind of drifted a bit. In my view, I thought Conleth Hill did a great job. I've really enjoyed watching him, but with his character on the TV show, they kind of just turned it into here's somebody who's just looking for a good monarch, which I think is part of Varys's character in the books, but that's by no means one of the most significant parts of his character. So that's because he did not have a specific candidate to get behind like young Griff. So that I think is the key thing, is that in the books he is incredibly driven and merciless. The killing of Kevin and Pycelle, what he does to the little birds, he can say, for all he likes, he can say, but what about the poor little children? What about the small folk? He's doing some pretty horrible things to get the result that he wants, which is not rare for a George R. Martin character. There's lots of characters who would say the end justifies the means in one way or another. But going forward, I think, is where we're going to see the biggest difference, because going forward, he is going to be very clearly with an agenda rather than just sort of like moving from one ruler to the next. Sir Steve the O saying, just a thought, the blue flames and the voice. This is back to his childhood. Could it just be another method of long-distance communication, like a less sophisticated means compared to a glass candle? Definitely wouldn't advise travelling to Myr if there's a risk of mutilation just to let someone take a phone call. But on a more serious note, the blue flames and the voice make me think of the others, or the great other. What's even more spooky then is that people are in communication with them, doing who knows what. Yeah, and I think George R. Martin left that deliberately vague. I think that's the point. I think the implication is that, yes, this is definitely some kind of communication, but it's communication with something that you couldn't just go to this person. They're a very long way away or something like that. So in order to do it, you have to cast magic in order to do it. The thing that several people have speculated on, which I'm quite sympathetic to, is this idea that Varys may have had some Valyrian or Targaryen blood in him somewhere. He comes from Lys, that various Targaryens have been there over the years, so it's entirely possible that he has traces of Targaryen blood in him. And that could be why the magician chose him, because it's very clear that he went and saw this performance and then he paid a lot of money for specifically that one boy. If he just wanted any random boy, he could have found a street child. If it was just any young boy, there had to be a reason why Varys was chosen, and the reason that we keep on being given is for casting magic is some, king's blood is powerful, or the other if you're a priest, perhaps, then sacrificing them might also be powerful. So that is just a random thought some people had. I'm quite sympathetic with that he was chosen because of his ancestry, which he himself may or may not know. Lorelei Dragon asking a related question: was the sorcerer who gilded Varys a red priest or someone else, a blood mage from a shy, perhaps? We're not told. He's referred to as a sorcerer, which is not a term which is generally used in George R. Martin's world. I think even though he's a child, and certainly with retrospect, Varys would have known a red priest. So I think it's pretty clear it wasn't a red priest. The blue flame thing is quite intriguing. Yes, blue is associated with cold, and therefore potentially the others. I think he likes this idea of just kind of hinting that maybe there's somebody there in contact with the great other or the others or something along those lines. It's in a language that he didn't know. but we just don't have the information. A blood mage from a shy, perhaps, I think is as good a guess as any. This is not a specific type of, as far as we can tell, it's not worship of the old gods with weirwood sacrifice. It doesn't seem to be R'hllor, nor is it a Faith of the Seven thing. It does have echoes of the kinds of things that Melisandre has done, but her magic seems to be a mixture of R'hllor and also Shadowbinder magic from Ashai. So if I had to guess, it's probably more like that. Ranabin Mitra saying, oh, here we got two more questions. Actually, we're now moving away from Varys. If you've got more questions on Varys, now's a great time to drop them into the chat. But Ranabin Mitra saying, in your recent video on what's east of Ashai, I genuinely wanted to ask you how you felt making the video. So many references in the Far East to so many authors and so many mythos in fantasy literature. Me being a watcher or consumer of the video, felt that you and Aziz probably had a blast making this particular one. Please share your thoughts. Also, a side question. I will do that in just 1 minute. A side question. You said that Ulthos is different shade of green on the map. I side with Amanda from the Disputed Lands on this, in that Ulthos is entirely filled with shade of the evening trees, hence the petrified shade trees. Well, I would hesitate to disagree with Amanda on many issues. It has to be said. She's very intelligent and insightful in this, and I do very much subscribe to her ideas about a shy in relation to this. But yeah, for those who actually, let me just show you this because I happen to have it here. Take a look at this. If you've never come across this, there we go. The Lands of Ice and Fire. This is a beautiful thing. Actually, quite hard to get hold of these days, but these are the kind of official maps of the world of Ice and Fire. So you've got like 12 of them in there, just all of focus maps in on King's Landing and Bravos, as well as maps, bigger maps of the known world and things like that, and some people's journeys. Really interesting stuff. So that was where, if you were wondering where this the shade of green was slightly different. If you've no idea what we're talking about, this is a video that I did a week or two ago, and it was a collaboration with History of Westeros. So yeah, on that one, yeah, Aziz did the first draft and came out with a whole load. I have to admit, I don't know whether I'd have picked out all of those references, but what you'll find is off to the far east, beyond Ashai, there are a huge amount of, George Martin loves doing this, a huge amount of references to other fantasy writers, and in their worlds and their creations, in the names of things that are there beyond Ashai. So it was, I hugely enjoyed that. It's quite rare. Normally, I wouldn't do that, show that many references, because I think George R. Martin does kind of drop them in, but it was so prevalent there that it just felt right to just sort of identify this is what George R. Martin is doing here, is to try and make things evocative to us by not describing them, but by using words that are evocative of other stories that perhaps we might have read. Right, let's go to the chats and questions here. Scamelia, Varys presents himself as anti-magic because of his trauma, but would he overlook that for the good of the people? His other great cause or trauma. Yeah, so his anti-magic stance here is quite an interesting one, because we've only got his word for it. And when he was telling that story to Tyrion, it was while he was trying to ingratiate himself with Tyrion's. Basically, the situation there, you read the section for yourself, please do. But the situation was Tyrion's come down as acting Hand of the King, and Tyrion basically bosses the action for that entire book. This is like top tier Tyrion, book 2, Clash of Kings. And he's working out who's spying, working out who he can trust. He's kicking people out of King's Landing. He's authorizing murders of people. I mean, this is pretty, as I say, dark and gruesome stuff at times, but he is being ruthless in grabbing the chains of power at a time when it really was needed because the city was about to come under attack. Varys is trying to ingratiate himself with Tyrion because he knows Tyrion is there just going off. Pycelle, you've clearly been feeding information to Cersei. I'm going to send you to the Black Cells. Janos Slint, don't like you as the head of the Gold Cloaks. I'm sending you to the wall. You know, it's this kind of thing that he's just going through and eliminating anyone who doesn't want to be there. So that's the context, and in that context, Varys is trying to ingratiate himself with Tyrion, and he has this little heart-to-heart, and they're talking about, oh, I've heard rumors that Stannis has hired this witch, and then Varys says, yes, and I hate magic, and here's my tragic backstory about magic. And it's as if he's trying to prove to Tyrion that he's not just there trying to defend King's Landing because it's a job, but he really believes it. So that's the context, which does add in a little bit of doubt about whether that might be true. I want it to be true, but we don't 100% know that it is. And so in answer to whether he would overlook his anti-magic stance for the good of the people, as in, would he use magic in order to help the people? I think it depends on whether you think he is anti-magic or not. Class Ballerina saying, when escaping the dungeons with Tyrion, what does Varys not want Tyrion to see? Where the little birds live, torture or kidnap victims, Tyrek, wildfire. I mean, quite a lot of things he doesn't want him to see. There's, he doesn't want the secret. It could be any or all of those things is the short answer. But I think the bigger answer is that the layout. He is there showing Tyrion out from the Black Cells. What's the way to escape from the Black Cells out of the Red Keep? Tyrion's a clever guy. He will be able to remember that route that he's taken. The last thing that Varys wants, Varys thrives on information he has and other people do not have. He does not want Tyrion knowing all of the secrets about where those passages are. So he doesn't want him going off in various other directions. He wants him going the one way that he wants to take him. John Merkel saying, okay, non-Varys question. Do you think the winter that made the full spring was caused by there being no Starks in Winterfell? Benjen chaperones Lyanna's ride to Rhaegar, so Winterfell-like in dance. Good question, but I think the answer is no. So you get... The answer is no, because there was, well, two reasons. Firstly, it was a natural winter, a normal winter, as far as we can tell. It was the spring that was false. The spring, and it was the year of the full spring. The spring appeared for long enough for the tourney at Harrenhal to happen, and then the spring disappeared, and then the winter came back. That is basically it. We call it the year of the full spring, but really it's just like a bit of spring happened there when it shouldn't have done. It was the year of the two winters is another way they could have put it. There was an interval there. Somebody made that happen. Now my take is that this is always blame Bloodraven, obviously, but that it was the Weirwood network moving in order to try and shift things. Bloodraven wanting to shift things so that the tourney at Harrenhal could happen. But the point about the Starks here is that there was always a Stark in Winterfell. So during the winter, the Starks were based up in Winterfell. Obviously, Ned is not, and then Brandon has been sort of wandering and round doing his things. But Daddy Stark, Rickard Stark, was there, as were the two younger children, Lyanna and Benjen. Then came the tourney at Harrenhal, and Rickard says, "Okay, kids, go. You go down, have fun at the tourney." I'm sure he didn't say go have fun. I'm sure he actually gave them some marching, or at least Brandon gave them some marching orders for his Southron ambitions. But they all go down there. Then there's going to be the wedding, Brandon's wedding. So Brandon stays down south, Ned stays down south, Lyanna stays down south, Benjen heads back north. And then there seems to be this kind of tag team thing. He goes up to Winterfell. When he arrives at Winterfell, his father can now leave and head down for the wedding. So that's it's a little bit silly, but that's what seems to have happened, is that there was always a Stark in Winterfell during that period. And this is why Benjen was then stuck up in Winterfell all the way through Robert's Rebellion, because he was the Stark in Winterfell. Couch Ballerina. Doran thinks Cersei is plotting to kill Trystane. Cersei never thinks of this in her POV. Is Varys behind the rumor reaching Doran? So Dawn goes to war. Yeah, it's possible. I've not really thought about that. That's definitely possible. It's also worth pointing out, just generally, just because a character doesn't think about something in their POV does not mean that that's not a true thing. There's lots that Ned does not think about, for example, in his POV chapters, that are very important bits of information, but we just don't get them because in that period of time, in those POV chapters, he's not thinking about that. So I don't think that the fact that Cersei doesn't think about a thing, that doesn't mean that she's not doing it. Okay, I think that's me caught up in the chat. And then Rana Ben Mitra, last question from my patrons. Rana Ben Mitra saying, is Queen Baruthiel the primary inspiration for Bloodraven? We will never get confirmation of this from George R. R. Martin, but I genuinely completely forgot about this character mention, and your recent short basically spelt everything the Bloodraven does in court, except with ravens instead of cats. What do you think? Yeah, so if you missed this was on this channel, IDG Live. I do shorts. I try to do one a day. I don't always manage it. Just a minute of me making a small point about something. They're quite fun. And the one I did, I think, yesterday was about Queen Baruthiel. This was a Tolkien thing. And in case, and there's no reason, if you're a normal Tolkien fan, that you may well not have come across this. It's only the kind of thing that you sort of spot when you're digging deep into the weeds of sort of the legendarium. Queen Baruthiel, a queen of Gondor, was a cat queen, in as much as she was surrounded by cats. She didn't particularly like cats, it has to be said, but they loved her. And eventually she decided to make use of this. And so she had 10 cats, 9 black and 1 white. And the 9 black cats she sent out to spy on people. And then the 1 white cat she sent out to spy on the 9 black cats. And through some kind of magic, we don't know the detail of, she could communicate with them and they would give her all the secrets of what was going on in the court and in the land. And eventually, though, people started to figure this out, and she got exiled. So that's the story of Queen Baruthiel. It's sort of this like kind of weird little footnote in Gondorian history, and Aragorn entirely randomly name checks her. I say entirely randomly. This is wonderful from Tolkien. True for what he's like is that there's no word of context here for the casual reader. But he's done a whole load of deep dive on this and just come out with Aragorn when they're in Moria and Gandalf is like humming and hawing about which direction to go, he just comes out with this random quote saying, "Oh, and I trust Gandalf even more than one of um, Queen Beruthiel's cats in the dark," or something like that. And it's just like no one knew then who on earth this was talking about, but this was just Tolkien just referencing another bit of his wider legendarium. Anyway, that wasn't the point you're making. You're making is this is the inspiration for Bloodraven. I mean, I think you're right. George R. Martin isn't going to ever say this. To the best of my knowledge, he's never mentioned Queen Beruthiel. There's certainly, yeah, there's an element of this is that member of the royal family spying on people through animals. I mean, this isn't unique to Tolkien, it has to be said. But yes, George R. Martin will have been aware of it, and I think it's quite fun to think of him taking inspiration. Randall Barker saying, could Varys's mutilation be a result of someone ending the male line of the Blackfires, possibly involving Bloodraven since it involved someone practicing magic? Then, with Varys castrated, he had to resort to his sister Sarah. I mean, it could, but the way that the story is told, the point of what happened was not the damage to Varys. The point of it was in order to have this conversation through the flames with whatever that is. At the end of which, the sorcerer didn't seem to really care what happened to Varys. So I think instinctively, no, this isn't somebody trying to make a point with the Blackfires. This was just using somebody who has a sacrifice would have given them the magic they needed in order to get the ends that they wanted, if that makes sense. Scamelia, did Varys know that Joffrey was going to be killed? He knew so much of the Red Keep's ongoings. That's a really interesting question. I mean, this is I don't know is the short answer. You would expect that he would have a sort of an idea, but there is certainly a hint within the text that Littlefinger went to efforts to make sure that Varys did not know. And in particular, what he did was to make sure that the meetings that Sansa had, where this was discussed, took place in the Godswood. And Littlefinger specifically says the Godswood is the one place where the little birds, Varys's spies, can't overhear you because they can't be hiding in the walls. This is a little bit of woodland. Yeah, they could sort of hide behind a tree or something, I guess, but this isn't the same kind of thing as Winterfell's Godswood, where it's proper woody and you can hide there. This is a manicured, beautiful place with just a few random trees around and about. You would be able to see people. So I think the answer to the question is you would expect he would have known, but we know that Littlefinger was trying to make sure he didn't. So probably he didn't. Carlos Ballerina picking up a question for Adam saying, what's Varys's age? Oh, well, this is a good question. We're not told exactly, but you can kind of work it out. So, within sort of boundaries, in as much as he. So we've got 2 years of the current story. We've got 15 or so of working for Robert Baratheon. So that's 17 years plus another, I think, 4 working for the Mad King. So that's 21 years. And before that, he'd worked his way up to the top of a criminal empire in Pentos, which you would have thought that he must be, he couldn't be younger than 20. one would have thought, given all that had happened to him. So I think you're probably looking someone in their 40s, is my best guess. But he could be even older. He could be in his 50s. Because we're not told that a year that he was born in or anything like that. Right. Okay. I think that is it for my patrons' questions. Let me have a quick flick through the chat. Northern Tommy saying I'm going with Varys being 37 to 45. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's worth just saying that in general on the TV show, the characters looked older than they were in the books. So particularly notice it particularly among the children, the younger characters like the young Starks, for example, but also the next generation up. So Ned Stark was a lot younger than Sean Bean. Andrew Kay saying, "I like the particulars with the sorcerer. The particulars with the sorcerer aren't known. Adds to the mystery and intrigue, and suggestive of goings on beyond what we know about yet. Couldn't say that better." DK saying most seem to assume Varys stayed in King's Landing after the Tywin incident, but as shown by Illyrio going back and forth in secret, could Varys have spent some time in Pentos or elsewhere? He could have done. He could have done. But I think there's like two things potentially against it. That firstly, travel takes a long period of time, and so I don't know the exact timescale we're looking at there, but it's not huge amounts of time, maybe 6 months or so. So he's not going to have spent ages somewhere else. And then secondly, his role in the big plan is to stay in King's Landing and prepare the way. He could not do that if he was just going off chilling somewhere else. So I think he was probably hanging around there all the time. Sapphire Solstice saying, "What was he doing during all of the Dance with Dragons? Where was he living? In the secret passages in Red Keep." Is the general answer to that one. There's a lot there. Sebastian Holden saying, "Why didn't Varys warn Ned of the faceless man in the black cells? Did he know he was there, or his purpose? Did he want Ned dead too?" I don't think he did know he was there, and in fact, at that point in time, he might not have been there. So we're not told all of the ins and outs of this. What we're told is that Rorg and Biter seem to be scared of Jaqen. And the general working assumption among the fandom is that this is because they saw him. Maybe he did the face-changing thing or something like that. Maybe he killed the real Jaqen. But it's entirely possible that the person we call Jaqen clearly isn't Jaqen. He's a face changer. So it's entirely possible that he came in once Ned was already there. He came in and switched places, and that's what scared Rorg and Biter. But Varys, as great and impressive as he is, then he won't necessarily know a faceless man, because the faceless man are next level in terms of their disguises. They seem to operate on a few levels. They get taught, like Varys, they get taught the basics of like the mummer's craft. How do you not just have a physical disguise on, but how do you disguise your voice? How do you make your body shape feel different and your movements different and things like that? That's their level one, but they've also got the deeper level here, which is the actual face changing. Reflective Rambling, picking up a question for Fred. Thank you very much. Varys's spies are children. How trustworthy can they be? What is Varys's knowledge really worth? How trustworthy can they be? I mean, it's a good question. He clearly thinks that there's a potential that they won't be trustworthy. because he has their tongues cut out. And if they don't know how to write, then all they know how to do is communicate with him in some way, then they're not going to be giving information to anyone else. I think you have to say that there is a risk that one or more of them could run away. Certainly, Illyrio seems to think that getting the exact type that he wants is quite hard, because that's quite rare to find someone who is that intelligent and that young and that adaptable and things like that. So yeah, it's entirely possible. But are they trustworthy? Mostly, one would assume. Scamelia, picking up a question for Cheryl Baxter. Thank you very much. How will Dany and Varys meet? I think, well, we don't know, but I think that if Varys is very much team Fagon, then once Fagon is there ruling in King's Landing, then Dany will arrive. And at that point, Varys doesn't have to be hiding anymore. He can be very strongly out in the open as part of the court, as part of the small council. And you have to say, who would you send to meet Daenerys? You could send John Connington. You could send Varys. Perhaps both. But that's how it's when Dany arrives and has to deal with the fact that, oh, there's somebody already sat on the Iron Throne that I thought was mine, and they're claiming to be ahead of me in the line of succession. Stephen Carver, Varys could be lying about hating magic and actually using magical disguises and magical eavesdropping tricks. Yep, that's entirely possible. And I think probably with that, I will start to draw this one to a close, because we can look at what I think next week. Shall we do an open Q&A next week? I think it feels like it's been a couple of weeks since we've done one of them. I also want to get back into the habit of doing Lord of the Rings ones once a month. So, and probably in a couple of weeks I'll do a pre-recorded one, which is one I've been wanting to do for a while. It was R plus L equals J. Because I just want to spend some time setting out all the evidence. We know most of this already, I know, but there's so much of it that we often just overlook, and so I want to just spend the time going through it. Obviously, take questions and that, but just talking through it for, and who knows, a reasonable period of time first, and then we'll just sort of go through all of the different challenges that we've got to it. Another question just appeared. Sebastian Holden saying Bloodraven had influence in Westeros. Is Quaithe doing the same in Essos? Any proof of influence outside of Dany? Is she the voice in the Blue Flame? I don't think she's the voice in the Blue Flame. But I think you're onto a very important point with the echoing of Bloodraven and Quaithe. My take on Quaithe is that that's Shira Seastar. And I think pretty sure I've done a video setting out all my logic leading up to that. It feels right to me on many levels. There's lots of evidences that point to it. But she has clearly decided the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai Reborn, this is Dany. Bloodraven have clearly decided it's Jon Snow. And so they've both got their own champions, and I think that they don't even know that the other's still alive. And I think that is what is going in. She's not, in terms of huge influence in Essos, no, but influence with Dany, yes. Okay, so we will be back next week with another one of the live streams. Might be an open Q&A. I might have another topic I can come up with between now and then. A reminder, if you want to listen to and watch my videos on my main channel over on Spotify, do go and check that out. This will at some point be appearing on In Deep Sleep, this video, and appearing somewhere here, if you're watching this later, is a link to other live streams that I've done, appearing somewhere around here. is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so, in which case, thank you very much. Moderators, you are amazing. Thank you. Patrons, you are also amazing. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.